Just waiting for the red light, and I will let you know. Okay, Mr. Chairman, we're ready to go.
Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome you to the regular meeting of the Milwaukie Planning Commission. Agendas and additional copies of staff reports are available on the city website at www.milwaukieoregon.gov. You may locate them by navigating to the community calendar where tonight's meeting page is posted. If you have not reviewed the agenda, please do so. It contains important information about the process. If you wish to provide public comment, please log into the Zoom meeting or call into the meeting. Instructions for logging in and calling in are located on the meeting page on the city's website. In order to be included in the meeting record, public comments must be received during the applicable portion of the meeting. That is, general comments must be made during the open audience participation portion of the meeting, and comments on specific public hearings or work sessions must be made before the close of the public testimony portion of the agenda item. We will follow the basic public hearing procedure format listed on the back of the agenda. It includes the hearing procedure steps. We may vary from the process based on the specific circumstances of each hearing. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes from the January 12th, 2021 meeting. Does anyone have any corrections to make? Commissioner Hemer?
I have two, and even though that Steve Adams would probably like to have Justin's pay scale, they call him city manager, or they call him city attorney on page 7 when it should be city engineer. And then on page 15 under Commissioner Hemer's, about 3/4 of the way down on the paragraph, I was talking about tripping over cords with the electric vehicles. And instead of saying cord, they put in the word code. So that should be changed to cord.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other corrections? I have one. Under item 8.0 on page 19, a motion by Commissioner Hemer nominating Commissioner Loosevelt as the chair candidate and nominating under the what's written right now himself as the vice chair. That should actually be changed to Commissioner Edge instead of Commissioner Hemer, as evidenced by who's speaking right now. So with that correction, that's all I have. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve is amended.
Motion by Commissioner Sherman. Was that seconded by Commissioner Hemer? Thank you. All those in favor? And say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Are there any informational items from staff tonight?
There are not.
Okay. So this is the audience participation portion of the meeting. This is an opportunity to comment on items that are not on tonight's agenda. If you wish to comment on an item that is on the agenda, there will be a time for comments after the presentation. Does anyone wish to comment on an item that is not on tonight's agenda?
If I may, Vice Chair, if I may just make a comment, I want to thank the planning staff and whoever was involved with Chair Roosevelt's video that came out about joining up the comp plan. It was very well done. It was a very nice, warm, sunny day, at least it looked like. And so excellent videography and an excellent message. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Vera.
Vera, are there any attendees who wish to comment on items that are not on the agenda?
I don't see any hands raised, Mr. Chairman, and I don't see any emails into the Milwaukie Planning inbox.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So we're on to our public hearings. The next agenda item is a public hearing on the Hillside preliminary plan development. The public hearing on Hillside preliminary plan development is called to order. The purpose of this hearing is to consider application number PD-2020-002. The purpose of the application is to request conditional approval of a preliminary plan development on property located at 2889 Southeast Hillside Court. The applicant has the burden of proving that the application is consistent with the City of Milwaukee's zoning and subdivision ordinance, comprehensive plan, any applicable municipal code provision, and that the proposal conforms with all of the city's applicable criteria. I now ask staff to cite the zoning ordinance sections where the criteria can be found.
Milwaukee Municipal Code 19.302, medium and high density residential zones. Section Chapter 19.311, plan development zone. Chapter 19.505.3, multifamily housing. Chapter 19.600, off-street parking and loading. Chapter 19.700, public facility improvements. Chapter 19.902, map and plan amendments. Chapter 19.1006, type 3 review. Chapter 17, land division for property line adjustment. Or no, sorry, that one is not one of them. Sorry. And then chapter 12.16, access management.
Thank you. All testimony and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria. Failure to address a criterion or raise an issue with sufficient detail to allow the Planning Commission an adequate opportunity to respond to each issue precludes appeal to the City Council based on that issue. Failure to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow a response precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Any party withstanding may appeal the decision of the Planning Commission to the City Council, except in this case. That's actually not true for this particular review, is that this is not an appealable decision. So I will move on to the conduct of hearing. We will recognize those persons submitting testimony. Please state your name and email for the record so they may be entered into the minutes. If you are here to testify, please remember to confine your remarks to the application and relevant criteria and to avoid repetition and information not relevant. The moderator may mute you if disruptions occur. If additional documents or evidence are provided by any party, the Commission may, if requested, allow a continuance or leave the record open to allow the parties a reasonable opportunity to respond. Any such continuance or extension shall be subject to the limitations of the 120-day rule unless the continuance or extension is requested or agreed to by the applicant. Tonight, we will limit testimony to 3 minutes per person. And if we have any NDA representatives that are here representing their NDA, they will have up to 10 minutes to comment. Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to abstain from this hearing? Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest? Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to report on any ex parte contacts? Will any commissioner who has visited the site prior to this hearing please raise their hand? Did any of those commissioners who visited the site speak to anyone at the site or note anything different from what is indicated in the staff report for this application?
No.
Oh,
Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the participation of any member of the Planning Commission? And Vera, you'll have to let us know if anyone responds to that.
I don't see any hands raised. No.
Okay, thank you. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to hear this matter?
No hands are raised.
Thank you, Vera. Let's proceed to the staff report presentation.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to note for everyone that Commissioner Ert has joined us for the meeting as well. So she's here just in time. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Can I confirm that folks can see a PowerPoint presentation? Great,
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening, Vera Collier, Senior Planner, and here as well to present the staff report is Steve Adams, City Engineer. And we're here to present the staff report for Master File PD 2020-002, the Hillside Preliminary Planned Development. Okay. So I want to, it's not. Sorry, there it goes. Okay. The subject property is outlined here in red on the screen. It's located at 2889 Southeast Hillside Court. It's a neighborhood of predominantly single dwelling units is located to the north. The campus of Providence Hospital is to the east. The vacant so-called Murphy site, the Murphy lumber site, is to the south. And the North Milwaukie industrial area, the Southern Pacific Rail Line, and Highway 224 are immediately to the west. The site is located in the Ardenwald neighborhood and is adjacent to the central Milwaukie portion of the city. The subject property, again outlined here in red, is zoned residential R3, which is a high-density residential zone, adjacent to the site of the R7 zone to the north, the general mixed use or GMU zone to the south, and the NME North Milwaukie employment zone to the west. The proposal. This is the general master plan, site plan that was included in the staff report. The applicant is seeking land use approval to develop a mixed income community of a total of 600 units, 400 new units, 100 replacement units for the cottages that are on the site now, and then the existing 100 units in the Hillside Manor Tower for a total of 600 units on the site. At the end of all phases of development, the applicant is using the plan development process, which allows greater flexibility in design than would otherwise be possible through the standards of the underlying R3 zone. As described in the application materials, the existing houses in Hillside Park will be replaced with 100 new affordable units for the population for the folks currently being served on the site. Removing the existing houses creates the opportunity to develop 400 residential units that will include a mix of both affordable and market rate housing. The new units will provide a variety of housing choices. So the proposal includes walk-up townhomes in the northern part of the site adjacent to the R7 zone to the north. And then also including 3- and 4-story mixed income apartment buildings to the south. In addition to the residential development, the proposal includes opportunities for small scale commercial and office uses on the ground floor of the buildings along 32nd Avenue, and those are identified there to the side. The GMU zone, or the general mixed use zone, allows for a wide variety of uses. So many of which are not appropriate for or compatible with the proposed development in the surrounding context. The master plan includes subdividing the property into smaller lots to facilitate phased development and provides the opportunity for development of lots by outside partners. I'll get into a little more detail of that here. So the phasing plan. So the proposed redevelopment on the site will involve the phased demolition of existing improvements on the site, including removal of structures, demolition of the existing roads, and removal or abandonment of the underground infrastructure. A new street grid and infrastructure plan is proposed with the streets to be realigned. So it's more of a grid and block system. The phasing plan includes assisting the current Hillside Park residents with relocation into one of the new units upon completion. The first phase anticipates the Housing Authority developing at least 100 replacement units that will be leased to low-income residents. Part of this proposal includes a proposed rezoning of the property. In order to reach the density goals and allow for mixed-use development, the final development plan and program includes a request to change the zoning and the comprehensive plan designation of the property. The northern portion of the site is proposed to have a zoning of R1 and a comprehensive plan designation of high-density residential. The southern portion of the site is proposed as GMU, or general mixed use, with a comp plan designation of town center, consistent with the property directly to the south across Meek Street. So this map shows what the proposed zoning would be. And again, the current site is zoned R3. So they're proposing a split zone on the site. The applicant is, again, seeking land use approval to develop this 600-unit apartment community with some mixed-use buildings, and they're using the planned development process. The planned development, and that, again, land use file PD 2020-002, allows for adjustments in lot sizes, lot dimensions, and some development standards. For the preliminary development plan and program, which is the proposal and the hearing that we're having this evening, is an approval in principle which is what is laid out in the code in section 311. And that's required to move forward for a final development plan and program, which will include a review of the requested zone changes. So that's why we're in a preliminary plan development review right now. As part of this review, we are also conducting a transportation facilities review. The project's impacts on transportation, both including vehicular, bicycle, and pedestrian, have to be evaluated to determine whether improvements to the transportation system are warranted. So the applicant submitted the preliminary development plan and program, which is being processed as a type 3 application for the purposes of noticing and establishing a review by the Planning Commission. And again, if they are successful and the commission approves in principle of the preliminary plan development, then the applicant will have to initiate a type 4 review process by submitting a final development plan along with the proposed subdivision and any other applicable reviews within 18 months of the approval. That's laid out in the code itself. And then the commission would consider that application package at a public hearing and make a recommendation to city council. And then city council would hold their public hearings and issue the final decision. So that's in the type 4 final process. But right now we're in the preliminary plan development process tonight. Staff has identified 3 key issues for your review this evening, including traffic impacts, utilities impacts, and then does the preliminary development plan and program satisfy the provisions of the code section 311. So we'll walk through each of those. I'm going to ask the city engineer, Steve Adams, to talk about the first 2 issues. And we can start. And Steve, if you just want to let me know when you want the slide advanced, I'm happy to do that. So over to you. Sure.
Thank you. The transportation impact study was completed, reviewed by myself and by DKS. We had them look at 10 intersections. Of these 10, the only 2 that were found to be deficient was the intersection at Meek and 32nd, which is actually the visual I put on the left of this because I wanted to talk a little bit about it. There's enough southbound traffic on 32nd here that it created what they call a warrant, which means there's sufficient traffic to for a reason to make a left turn lane pocket there. And so I'm having them put in the left turn lane pocket. This is to create frustration from people going northbound on 32nd, being stuck behind someone wanting to turn left. We don't need the left turn pocket until we hit about 325 units. So it is up to the applicant when they choose to install it. They could choose to install it at the initial stage, or they could wait and install it at the phase that brings in that 325th unit. But it will create a calmer intersection here by installing this left turn pocket. We have plenty of right-of-way to the east to allow the road to be widened. Additionally, the current crosswalk is a little bit offset. It sets about 40 feet north of the intersection. That's generally not a safe location. You want pedestrian traffic crossing at the intersection, not 40 feet north, because drivers will see them more if they're closer to the intersection. So I've required the applicant to move the crosswalk to the north leg as you see pictured here. So again, that's overall, it'll be a safer intersection. The other intersection that will fail to meet traffic level of service is the one at Harrison and 42nd. We have known about this intersection for a number of years that it will fail. It will fail whether this development gets built or not. Just the simple background traffic of the city and small infill projects will create that 4-way stop to fail by 2026. So it's been in the TSP to make that a signalized intersection. It was equally identified as a need in the Monroe Street Greenway project when the city went through that in 2015, 2017. We update the TSP starting next year. And in the TSP, the priority of that intersection will be moved higher in priority, and we will need to find funding for that to make that a signalized intersection there at 42nd and Harrison. Other than that, all the rest of the intersections studied all function at level of service D or better. Most of them, in fact, function at level of service B or C. So the development is not predicted to have a highly negative impact. And the one negative impact they are creating at Meek and 32nd, they will be taking care of during development. That's all I had on transportation. Does somebody want to have any questions about transportation right now? Seeing none, Vera, let's go to the next slide.
I'm sorry, Steve.
Oh, go ahead.
Is this a time to talk about the TSP and the bicycle connection off of 29th, or
Sure. We can talk. It's okay by me. It's okay by Vera and Laura.
I don't know if this falls into the transportation part, but so
Yes.
I am confused. When I looked at the TSP, it called out, this route to be what is labeled as AT, which is kind of a neighborhood greenway, but maybe it's listed more as a path made easy for bicycles, I guess. Is the road that is designed that is connecting into 29th, is that sufficient for what is called out on the TSP plan?
One deficit we have is that the existing 29th Avenue peters out about 100 feet north of this property. Being an off-site improvement, by law, the city will have to fund that little piece of street improvement on 29th. So they will build the new 29th up to the north property boundary. We will either negotiate with them to build that next little 100 feet piece and reimburse them, or we will include it with a CIP project. But 29th is envisioned to be a Sharrow type street, moderate, mild traffic. Really, there's not much traffic on 29th, less than 100, 200 cars a day go down it. And once that hits Meek, we don't have in stone yet if the Central Milwaukie bike corridor will go, how it will connect down to Monroe Oak Railroad, where it ties into the Monroe Street Greenway. But yes, that's one of the reasons why at the boundary of 29th, between the project and the neighborhood to the north, that's one of the reasons why I've requested a gate to be put in there, emergency access gate, so that police, fire, public works can open the gate, get access there. So if there is some emergency of some sort, we were able to provide another access exit for the people within the development or for the neighborhoods north of the development. Around the gate, I would envision an 8 or 10 foot wide multi-use path that peds and bikes will be able to use to access 29th on the south side of the gate and 29th on the north side of the gate. Did I answer your inquiries, or do you have an additional question for me?
No, that answers it. It sounds like that either if the street gets put in, right, or not, either way, there's still going to be that bicycle connection that's going to be made.
Yes, it will be made.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. For the utilities and streets, everything that's out there right now outside of the lower parking area where the tower parking is and the tower itself, pretty much everything else is, and Meek staying, at least the 1 block stretch of Meek we have right now. Other than that, all utilities and all streets will be brand new with this project. So the slightly skewed grid that we've had for 50, 60 years is going away. The streets are going to align perpendicular to 32nd. They will be all new streets all the utilities we have there, sanitary, water, storm, will all be either removed or abandoned in place, and all new utilities will be installed with this project. We've been working with the Housing Authority of Clackamas County to stage it such that no one goes without services during construction. So it'll be phased. So as phase one gets built, there'll be connections made so that people living in homes north of there can still live in their homes. So we have been working with them on a plan to stage this as it goes through it. Same thing with streets. We have to provide 20-foot wide paved streets for access by Clackamas Fire District, by ambulances. And so again, there'll be a staged construction, making sure that emergency services have access to that phase being built, and the streets will be completed prior to anyone living in the new units. And the water and sanitary will be completed. Water has to be completed before the new units get built because it's a fire life safety issue to have working fire hydrants. Sanitary typically gets installed before water. So most of this will all be completed prior to any of the buildings going vertical. And capacity, we've done capacity analysis. The services we have around this area, there is plenty capacity to handle what is the existing 200 units and adding 400 units to it. It does not create a capacity issue. It does not create a water pressure issue. It has been studied, and this project will work as designed. And that's all I had on this, unless someone had a question.
Commissioner Sermon, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Edge. Going back maybe to the previous slide on kind of transportation impacts, I was wondering if you could just kind of orient us to this image.
I'm sorry.
So kind of cutting to the left, it sounds like is Meek. And are we looking, is the top of the image north or the top of the image south?
Top of the image is north, so Meek is to the left, and Providence Milwaukie Hospital parking lot is to the right.
Okay, great. Thanks. That's really useful.
Sure.
I guess I had a question as I was like reviewing the applicant's proposed plan, and I didn't see this in any of the briefing documents for Planning Commission. So I think I'd like to kind of confirm whether or not it's happening. But the applicant in their proposed plan on, I think it was Roman numeral page 3-31, said that they were proposing kind of on 32nd, a sidewalk that would be 6 feet wide with an 8-foot wide planter strip and a 5-foot wide bike lane. Is that still happening or not?
I don't believe, Barry can help me out here, I don't believe a bike lane's being added to 32nd. I know they're widening the street for parallel parking. And on Vera's diagram, you can see the red on the upper left corner. This is kind of the planned new curb radius, new sidewalk. There will be a bus pickup zone in this area. But I did not require a bike lane to be added. I thought they were just adding 8 feet of pavement for parallel parking and then repaving the southbound travel lane.
If I could, that's what I'm seeing on the plans as well. So if there's language about that in the plan set or in the narrative, the applicant and their team is on the call. So perhaps if maybe we can table that specific question to when they come on, and we can confirm that, if that's okay.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'll try and make sure to dig up the reference and be sure that I was correct in reading that as well. And maybe just a follow-up question around kind of the connection on 29th. I guess I was kind of wondering under what kind of conditions does the gate open or not open? And it sounds like it's kind of pretty clearly a kind of under emergency settings. Is that correct?
It would be under emergency settings. So typically there's a lockbox there that there's a standard key that the fire department and that city public works has. And so that either department can unlock it and move through. So I can see public works using it if they want to do maintenance and not drive their vehicles around. They can unlock the gate, drive their vehicles through for maintenance and whatnot. Fire is strictly emergency usually. Usually there's a blaze going on. You need to get people out of a neighborhood, and that was when the gate would be unlocked, either by public works crews or by Clackamas fire crews.
Okay. Was there ever any discussions in maybe in lieu of a gate, anything like bollards, which might be a little bit more aesthetically pleasing?
I've used both of them. I tend to like gates a little bit more, but honestly, I'm open if Planning Commission and others like the bollard design. I'm not steadfast on one or the other.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
So Steve, if I could continue that question about Southeast 29th, as proposed, they will build Southeast 29th out to the north property line. But then after that, there will be about 100, you said about 100 feet of unimproved right of way north of the site?
Yes.
Is there any ability to provide that multi-use trail connection or a multi-use path connection through that without improving the full road right of way for general purpose traffic?
That's an option. We could look at just building gravel up to the bollards or the gate on that north side and just having a narrower paved connection up to 29th. I don't see an issue with that. I don't typically do gravel roads right next to paved roads, but it could be an option. It would.
And the TIS indicated the impact study indicated that it would not be consequential to not make that connection in the future. Correct? Yeah, for general purpose traffic.
That's for traffic, yeah. So it's forecast that so little traffic would use that entrance that it's not needed, that the new Dwyer Street connection and Meek Street connection will handle the anticipated traffic from the development just fine.
And so if this application were to be approved and the final program approved, there would still be some opportunity in the future to perhaps if the TSP gets updated and changes the designation of 29th in that stretch, or that we would still have an opportunity to explore different alternatives for that segment of 29th. Is that correct?
Indeed. Right now, because we have nothing in the TSP identified to extend 29th. So we have to do something to make this work,
okay.
Whether it's a 12-foot wide multi-use path and gravel or whatever. But so in 2022, 2023, we all have a chance to re-examine what type of street surface the city wants north of the development.
Okay, perfect. And then I also had one more question about the, which I believe is in your area of expertise here, the bus stop design for the relocated Hillside Drive bus stop. And I think it would go in at Dwyer. It's proposed to go in on the near side southbound on 32nd at the Dwyer intersection. But I think that was designed, so far what I've seen on the site plan is that's designed with a pullout for the bus that would then have to merge back into traffic after unloading and loading passengers. Whereas further to the south at the Meek intersection, it looks like the bus stops in the travel lane. And I was wondering why we would do those differently. Why would the design call for a pullout 500 feet to the north, but then, or not 500 feet, maybe it is about 520 feet, I think. It's not very far between those two bus stops. And I'm wondering why the different treatments would be recommended.
The applicant might be able to respond to that too. My gut feeling right now is that the fact that the streets widen there already for parallel parking, so they just continued to widen parallel parking through to the intersection. But the applicant might have a better response than that.
So it's not necessarily required by you, by the city, to have the pull-out design.
No, it's not required by the pullout. I know a lot of transit districts don't like pullouts because it makes it less safe for merging with traffic. I also know a lot of citizens like pullouts because they don't have to get stuck waiting behind buses. So, but it's definitely safer from what my understanding, talking to transit directors over my career, it's definitely safer having buses stop on the travel lane.
Yeah, that is, from what I've seen in the guidance, that's the preferred design, and it would be an exception to do the pullout design. And so that's why I was curious why that was a specific feature in this plan. Commissioner Sherman, I see that you have your hand raised again.
Thanks, Commissioner Edge. I just wanted to say that I did find the reference that I was kind of referring to. If you look at the e-packet, attachment 3, it's page 47 of the electronic PDF package. And it's at the bottom of Roman numeral 3-31. And it says, Southeast 32nd Avenue, this existing street is classified as a collector in the TSP. New on-street parallel parking will be constructed, et cetera, et cetera. A new 5-foot wide dedicated bike lane will also be added to the west side of the street. These improvements will require the existing curb and sidewalk to be moved to the west and reconstructed with a 6-foot wide sidewalk and an 8-foot wide planter strip. So maybe we can get some more information from the applicant about this in their portion.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Sherman. Are there any other questions for Mr. Adams before we move on? Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks very much. We'll continue on the next key issue is whether or not the application and meets the requirements and the approval criteria for section 311. So this slide summarizes a couple of the items or sort of features of the project. Generally, what the applicant is seeking to do is to blend the density across the site. So although that there are two zones, the R1 and the GMU zoning, the blended density overall on the site is 41 dwelling units an acre, which fits between the density sort of spectrum of the R1 and the GMU zoning. So it sort of squares a little bit more towards the GMU, but it's within the range of the densities for the R1 and the GMU. The proposal is, as you can see in the graphic, the higher density development is towards the south. So they've sort of the lower density R1 kind of development, the townhomes and so on, are towards the north, adjacent to the single unit dwelling neighborhood there in the R7. And then as it sort of moves towards to the south, adjacent to the existing GMU zone, the existing Murphy site, and as you kind of progress closer into the Harrison and 32nd Ave intersection, that's where the higher density development is being proposed. Overall, there's 41% of the site is in some kind of open space landscaping type treatment, and that does include that the large open space parcel to the northwest. Overall, the site would have 29% tree canopy. So moving the site towards the overall city's goal of 40% tree canopy citywide. The application materials do talk about using green building construction methods, which is a requirement for a lot of their financing programs. So either Earth Advantage or LEED would be those green building standards. And overall, the project is contingent upon funding sources. In the staff report we talked, there are some from the applicant, sort of the income mix and the unit mix across the development, but it will be between 30% and 80% of the area median income. So it is a mixed income community, but it still is capped at the 80% AMI as proposed. So although they talk about sort of mixed income and some market rate, there is still an income restriction posed even on sort of that upper level of the units that are proposed. This slide summarizes some of the development standards that they're seeking to modify as part of the project. And the graphic that you see is the landscaping and sort of an open space graphic that was part of their application package to kind of get a sense of where the proposed green parts are on the site. They are asking for a minimum setback of 5 feet. One zone sort of towards the north, except as it's adjacent to the R7 zone. So they are asking to modify the setbacks to allow for a more uniform development pattern towards the north, but they are still maintaining the 15-foot setback to the R7 zone to the north. So they would be maintaining that part. It's all the interior setbacks. They've asked for some modifications in what kinds of materials are permitted as primary materials for the buildings, and they are, as part of their application, are looking to reduce the minimum parking requirements on the site and asking to sort of an overall parking ratio of 0.8 spaces per unit, and that does include the on-street spaces that they're proposing as part of the overall development proposal. There's a fairly extensive TDM program, or transportation demand management program, that they've described in their application materials that talks about a variety of things, including using transit, and they have a number of ideas about how they want to make sure that folks, aren't necessarily relying on vehicle use. They've also provided some statistics about the number of vehicles that are just generally part of their development as it is, and they're including bike repair stations, as well as part of that, an on-site coordinator to help folks with wayfinding and be able to use transit, a wayfinding station, distribution of all kinds of transit and wayfinding and transportation information to new residents, and e-scooter share programs. So there's a number of things that were described as part of that overall package to reduce the folks having to use vehicles as part of the project. And they are proposing 375 bike parking spaces throughout the development. That is less than sort of the one per unit, but they are scattered throughout the development. And so that's part of their overall proposal, is generally a reduced parking ratio for the overall site. This slide summarizes the approval criteria. Again, this is a preliminary plan development. So what the commission is being asked is an approval in principle, or sort of a conceptual approval to move the project forward into the final development plan and program. But again, the approval criteria is compliance with the various code requirements and sections that are already outlined in 311, which includes the site location and the character of the area. Is the proposed amendment and the proposed project compatible with the surrounding neighborhood? So we're looking at compatibility both with surrounding area, the land use pattern and density that's in the area. Is there a demonstrated need for the uses and for the project? Is there adequate does the proposal demonstrate that it addresses a public purpose and provide public benefits or amenities beyond what would be provided in the base zone? We've received comments. Some of those comments came in today, so I tried to forward them as soon as I got them today. But we did get comments from ODOT, and those were part of your application package. We received communication from the Ardenwald NDA, and then the other folks that are here listed, including the Fair Housing Council of Oregon. And so all of those were made either part of your packets or were shared with the commission today as they were received as of even this afternoon. The staff recommendation is that the commission approve in principle the preliminary development plan and program. That comes with a code requirement that the applicant within 18 months of an approval file the final development plan and program, subdivision, the whole ball and wax with the application, again, within 18 months. And that concludes the step. Oh, your decision-making options. Of course, you can approve the application in principle as we've recommended. You could approve the application in principle with modified findings and conditions of approval. We would need to read those into the record this evening. You could continue the hearing and advise the applicant of any deficiencies in their package. So we could continue working on this as well. The 120-day deadline for the application has been waived by the applicant. That was in an effort to make sure that the applicant had time to present to the Ardenwald NDA. So they did do that prior to this hearing as well. And I believe that concludes my presentation. Sorry about that. Got ahead of myself. I'm happy to answer any questions. The applicant and their team are here. So they're preparing to make a presentation to fill in the blanks or any of the gaps that I have in the staff report. So happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the commissioners for staff? Commissioner Hemer.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be hammering this home, and if Mr. Adams is still on the site. So I just want to make sure, because when I asked the question, or I thought it was resolved after I asked my question, that there was going to be a pathway built in what I'm going to call the grassy knoll to the north of the site and south of 29th. When this project is completed, regardless if a street comes through. Is that a true statement?
Yes, something needs to connect the existing paved 29th to the new 29th that the applicant will be constructing.
Okay, all right. I just want, because after listening to Vice Chair Edge, it sounded like that there may have been some confusion about a gravel. It's not going to be a gravel road. It is going to be a paved path, correct?
If the road is not totally paved, it'll be a combination of a paved path and a gravel section. So, because you need the 20-foot width for Clackamas Fire to access through the gate.
Oh, okay, all right. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Sherman.
Thanks, Vice Chair Edge. Just looking through. With regards to transportation demand management programming, do we know if the applicant is providing any subsidized transit passes for their residents?
Yeah, I know, I hear you.
I don't know that answer, Commissioner Sherman. That would be a good question to ask of the applicant, but they did not indicate that in their application materials.
Okay. Another question, Vera, this might be more for you. I believe it was kind of the Ardenwald NDA had kind of asked the question about how much time for each phase, how much time in total. Can you help us understand what that looks like?
Yes, and so the way the code is written does allow for sort of a 7-year build out of the approved project. So I think there might have been some confusion about how long phase 1 would take, but the way the code is written, it's intended that the approved plan has a 7-year construction window, the whole thing, not phase 1. So there is an opportunity within the code to ask for an extension of time, and that's sort of a different process. But the way the plan development code is written, it's intended to be a 7-year build out for the project. But again, the applicant may have some more details of sort of how kind of the timing. But I know that phase 1 was sort of laid out within a phasing, and then I think some market conditions and depending on sort of how their financing becomes available for the remaining for the remaining phases. But 7 years is intended to be the window for the project.
Okay. And then maybe just to make sure that I'm following what Commissioner Hemer is saying, I pulled up the Google map. So, and I'm noting what Steve was kind of saying in terms of the 29th Avenue technically ends and then becomes a grassy patch before it hits the property line. And so what is being talked about is that one way or another, probably the city compensating the developer will close that gap, and then the gate or the bollards will go in, and closing the gap will be some creative solution, whether that be gravel and with some pavement for the bike path or whatnot. Is that correct?
That is correct. And the developer, if they're listening, they're probably saying, what? Because I haven't discussed this with them yet. But I figured if the city's going to pay for it, I've never had developers say, no, we're not going to include it because it's at no cost to them. But this, they have not heard of this idea yet. I realized it just in the last month or two that, oh, hey, we don't have a connection north of the property. So this is kind of a new thing.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, so I guess we're into the testimony portion of the hearing. Have we received any correspondence on this matter other than those items included in the meeting packet?
No, as I indicated, the comments that you received in the packet, as well as those listed that were emailed out this afternoon, but nothing since then that I have seen so far.
Okay, cool. So it's time for applicant testimony. Are there comments from the applicant or their representative?
I believe there are. I see Debbie Cleek is on the call, and she is the applicant. And maybe I'll ask Debbie when she comes on to tell me who else should be brought over to speak.
And each representative from the applicant should state their name and the address for the record. And thank you.
Hi, Vera. Hi, Planning Commission. This is Debbie Cleek with the Bookin Group. And we have a presentation. There's 4 of us that are going to present to you. So we need Ryan McCluckey, Jill Smith, and Devin Ellen. And then we also have our civil engineer here with us. That's Dave Humber and Kristen McComb. And our traffic engineer, it's Jennifer Dangzinger. I think I just slaughtered her name. Sorry, Jennifer. So
just one more reminder, please. Please state your name and address for the record.
Okay.
Before you get started.
It's 1140 Southwest 11th Avenue, Portland, 9720605.
Okay, so I have given speaking privileges, Debbie, to the folks that you mentioned, I think. Was Jennifer Danzinger intended to be speaking as well?
We have Jennifer and Dave and Kristen available for questions.
Okay.
So they don't have a speaking part in our presentation, but they will be on hand if any questions come up. And Ryan McCluckey has the actual presentation to show, so he will want to share his screen. I don't know if you need to give him some sort of superpowers to do that.
I think I've promoted him adequately, but Ryan should let me know if he's not able to share his screen and I can do something different.
Okay.
I don't see where I can share my screen yet.
Yeah, same here. It looks the same as it did before. Yeah.
So I may not have done it enough. So hold on, sorry.
Do we need to change his role to a panelist, Vera?
That's exactly what I'm doing. Yeah, I think that's
Okay, that did it.
Done.
Yep.
Sorry. Okay.
Okay, can everyone see my screen?
And could you please state your name and address for the record?
Yes. My name is Ryan McCluckey. I'm with Scott Edwards Architecture, and my address is 8225 North Washburn Avenue, Portland, 97217.
Great, thank you.
So first, I'd like to turn it over to the Housing Authority at Clackamas County to introduce our team.
That's my cue. Thank you. I'm Jill Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Housing Authority of Clackamas County. And my address is 10225 Southwest Hillview Street in Tigard, Oregon, 97223. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I really want to thank the Planning Commission for considering our preliminary planned development application for the Hillside Park property. Our team that's here tonight, Debbie just kind of introduced them, but Devin Ellen will speak after me. Devin is the Interim Director of Development for the Housing Authority. Ryan McCluskey will do the majority of the presentation. He's the lead architect with Scott Edwards Architecture, and then Debbie Cleek is our land use planner with the Bookin Group. She'll also be presenting to you. As Debbie shared, we have some experts kind of hanging in the background to answer your questions. And just to kick it off, I wanted to share with you what a housing authority is and kind of what our purpose and mission are. We are not the county. A housing authority is actually a public corporation. It's a separate legal entity from Clackamas County, and we're created by the state. And the reason a public corporation like that is created is to give us the ability to be flexible while focused on a specific public mission to provide specific services. And our mission is to ensure that people in Clackamas County that are low income, generally earning 60% or less of area median income, have housing opportunities. And as I'm sure you all know, we're in an affordable housing crisis in our state. So the opportunity to work with you on our mission means tremendous amounts to the Housing Authority Board. And that board is made up of the Clackamas County Commissioners, plus one of the residents who actually lives in Hillside Manor. She's an equal voting member to the Housing Authority Board. So part of what a housing authority does is we administer federal programs like public housing. And public housing is what is represented in the bungalows that we're talking about redeveloping at Hillside Park. The Hillside Manor, the tower, has already been converted from public housing to a tax credit partnership through a complex tool that HUD offers housing authorities to make that transition out of public housing. Another complicated tool, unfortunately, would be used to transition Hillside Park out of public housing and ensure those folks have protections that they deserve, and then redevelop that community into a mixed income community. Hillside Park consists of 1 and 2 bedroom bungalows spread across 14 acres, and it was built in the 1940s. As I'm sure those of you who have visited the site know, it has reached its useful life. And unfortunately, HUD does not give housing authorities adequate resources to really rehabilitate and update these units as they really would need to be done. There's billions of dollars in unmet capital needs across the United States in public housing. Another restriction placed upon us is we are not allowed to place any debt whatsoever on public housing. So we're left to do what we can with what they give us. And that is one of the reasons that we're here today. That's a challenge. And so we've made the decision to disinvest in public housing and move into a different type of affordable housing that meets the needs of the people that we all share this county and community with. And we have this amazing vision, which you've seen. And I'm going to turn it over to Devin, our Interim Director of Development that works with me at the Housing Authority, to take you into a little bit of understanding the need that we're describing.
Hi, thank you for having me this evening. As Jill mentioned, I'm Devin Ellen. I'm the Interim Director of Housing Development with the Housing Authority of Clackamas County. My address is 6377 Southeast Yamhill Street, and that's Portland 97215. So Ryan, can you advance the slide? So the need for affordable housing in Clackamas County is considerable and continues to grow. The Housing Authority opened our waiting list for just 4 days last June, and we received over 13,000 applicants for only 1,200 spots on our waiting list. According to the City of Milwaukee's 2019 Housing and Residential Land Assessment, an estimated 37% of Milwaukee households are cost burdened. That means they currently pay more than 30% of their income towards housing costs. 27% of Milwaukee's renter households are severely cost burdened, meaning they pay more than 50% of their monthly income on rent. According to the data compiled from the county's 2019 Regional Housing Needs Analysis, over the next 20 years, the City of Milwaukee needs nearly 700 new rental units that are affordable to households at 80% of the area median income and below. So that equates to an annual income of $59,000 or less for a 2-bedroom household. And countywide, we need an estimated 10,527 new units. All that to say, the need for affordable housing in Clackamas County cannot be understated. Next slide, please. At full build out of Hillside Park, we anticipate at least 70% of the units will be reserved for households with incomes at 80% of the area median income and below. The graphics and table on this slide help highlight the possible profiles, income levels, and associated rents of future Hillside Park residents. As you can see, these units will serve people in your community that you likely interface with on a regular basis: seniors, teachers, grocery store clerks, and paramedics. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk briefly about how the financing for this project will come together. So most affordable housing developments involve several funding sources. In 2018, regional voters passed the Metro Affordable Housing Bond, which allocated slightly over $116 million in bond revenue to Clackamas County. As a county without entitlement cities, meaning without any cities with a population of at least 50,000 residents, all these bond resources run through the Housing Authority. The Housing Authority set aside nearly $64 million of this allocation to help finance the redevelopment of our public housing portfolio. So for the redevelopment of Hillside Park, we plan to leverage the Metro bond funds to access other public funding resources and use low-income housing tax credit revenue to pay for the redevelopment costs. The low-income housing tax credit program is the federal government's primary policy tool for encouraging the development of affordable rental housing. The program awards developers federal tax credits to offset construction costs in exchange for agreeing to rent restrict units for households with incomes at 60% of the area median income and below. Developers then sell their tax credits to outside investors, primarily banks or syndicators, in exchange for equity financing. The equity reduces the financing developers would otherwise have to secure and allows tax credit properties to offer more affordable rents. In addition to restricted rents, tax credit and Metro bond projects require an affordability restriction of 60 years, and that is recorded on the property's deed, thereby ensuring that the property remains affordable for the long term. One thing that's important to clarify is that the Housing Authority will not be developing all of these lots. Our mission is to connect citizens in need of housing with safe housing opportunities. Therefore, partnerships with developers specializing in affordable housing development is necessary to allow us to focus on our mission while getting new housing online to serve our clients. So these partner organizations might design, construct, and even manage the development once it's complete, but the Housing Authority will retain ownership of the land. For Hillside Park, HAC's role will be that of a conduit lender of Metro bonds and the leaseholder of the underlying land. We will have input as to what is built on the site, but we will not necessarily manage the individual development of the sites and the day-to-day property management. Lastly, I want to talk about the relocation plan for the existing residents of Hillside Park. On a parallel track with the land use process, the Housing Authority is working on a disposition application with the goal of submitting it to HUD for approval by the middle of this year. Once we have approval from HUD, the existing tenants will be issued a tenant protection voucher. A tenant protection voucher is a Section 8 housing choice voucher, and it's intended to assist residents who are being displaced in public housing dispositions like this one. Each resident will work with a relocation consultant provided by the Housing Authority, and residents will be given the choice to move into another available public housing unit, or they may choose their own housing in the private rental market. And that includes single-family homes, townhomes, and apartments that meet certain health and safety standards required by HUD. The Housing Authority is requiring a leasing preference for our Metro bond funded projects that gives priority placement to residents relocating from public housing. All park residents that are relocated will be given the first priority option to return to the newly constructed units at Hillside Park. As described by city staff, we are planning on a phased approach to the demolition and redevelopment so that less than half of the current residents will require relocation in the first phase. The plan is to develop 100 replacement units in the first phase that will be available for units being taken offline in phase 2 and residents relocated in phase 1. Now I'll turn it over to Ryan to walk you through the engagement and design details.
Thanks, everybody. I'm Ryan Milwaukie with Scott Edwards Architecture. I just want to walk you through the plans and some of the process that it took to get us here. We had an extensive public engagement campaign with this project. We started all the way back in July of 18 with some listening sessions to see what was important to the neighborhood, to the community. We didn't come into this with preconceived ideas of what this place would be. And over the course of now 3 years, we've arrived at a plan. So you can see that at various points, and I do want to highlight that the planning committee icon and stakeholder committees you see here are internal, not just to my company, but they were a group of interested individuals and stakeholders that would meet regularly, and we would give them project updates. So that's different than the Planning Commission. Just wanted to make sure that people understood that. We have the first part of the process was gathering a lot of information. Then we had what we call this inflection point, where then we started to actually put pen to paper and actually work with the physicalities of the site. That produced community design workshops, community open houses, which then we had 3 different master plans. We ran an online campaign as well to solicit comments from the public on the 3 options that were posed. One option came out as the front runner, and that was chosen to develop as the draft master plan. We then came back to the Planning Commission for the first time back in August of 19, and the City Council as well a couple weeks later to present that initial. We then have been working on developing these plans and making them a reality with engineering and more refinement. And we, and prior to this meeting, we had a request from the Ardenwald Neighborhood Association to represent to them to let them know what we've been working on. So we had that meeting a couple weeks ago, and we listened to more comments. We got a chance to explain some of the issues that we had heard come up in prior meetings from them, and showed how we addressed those concerns on the master plan. An overview of the master plan approvals process with this particular project. I just wanted to go over. This is a timeline for how the project moves through the approvals process. You can see the large marker, the current step where we are. We're at the Planning Commission approval point. you can see that there are still several steps left before we have actual buildings on the property. And you can also see that large orange bar underneath. The community engagement still continues because, as we all know, these are public meetings and further comments can be taken at this time. As we move into the blue section, that is the end of our approvals, kind of our development plan approvals. Then we go into the what Vera described as the final approval, where we will include a preliminary plat of the entire development and showing the phasing as well. And to reiterate what Vera said, all the construction will be done within 7 years of the start. And that start has to be 18 months after this approval. So that would include all 3 phases done in 7 years. Just a brief overview of the site. We're here at our Hillside Manor. We're on a rotated grid. We have the Ardenwald neighborhood to our north, Murphy to the south, industrial to the west, and Providence and some multi-family apartment buildings and medical office buildings to the east. The existing conditions of Hillside are this. We have a rotated grid that runs east-west across the site. Then that has small houses in the park. Utilities are a mixed bag. Some run along the streets, like you'll see the gas and electric, domestic water. However, the sanitary sewer runs in between the houses. So that was one of the existing conditions that presented a challenge to developing the site. And we quickly realized we couldn't use the existing utilities, so that a full redevelopment of the site was necessitated. So then we arrive at our master plan. The master plan is a really great opportunity to really redevelop this site. For the first item is that we're providing 3 times the amount of housing units that are currently supported on the site. There are currently 200. When the end of this project is completed, there will be 600 on site. The other feature about this is the fact that it is a planned development. If this site were left to be developed without this intense coordination of all the different buildings, spaces, roads, utilities, it likely would not be as pleasant to be in, and it would be very much not coordinated. So by using this planned development process, we really capitalize on the highly coordinated act of getting all these different project types and buildings to work together in a cohesive urban fabric. One of the things that is really great about this site is that it does reintroduce the grid back into the city fabric. That provides easier, safer connections at intersections, and it's easier to manage and navigate for people walking or driving or biking as well. One of the great things this plans provide is a variety of housing choices for people that were not there prior to this plan. The pink buildings you see are townhouses. They're meant for families, low density, small building, really relate well to the development of residential to the north that's already existing. The blue buildings are walk-up apartment buildings. They still have a residential look to them with gabled roofs and everything, but they have more density to them. As we come down the south of the site, you'll see yellow buildings, which are what we're calling elevator apartment buildings. Those typically are 3 and 4 stories. Excuse me, they have an elevator associated with them, which is higher density of units as well. And then the purple buildings with the overlay of the diagonal lines indicates high density mixed use buildings. And specifically the stripes on the building indicate where we would see that mixed use commercial component happening, which is limited at 32nd Avenue. Excuse me. These variety of buildings and provide a variety of spaces, variety of units as well. This is going to accommodate everything from studio apartments to 1 bedrooms with a lot of 2 bedrooms for families as well. So this is a mixed income development. It's meant for everyone. It is meant for market rate people, affordable housing people. This is going to be a much different feel than what is currently there on the site. As Debbie mentioned, our strategy is that these are all public streets. Therefore, they divide the lots up into different parcels that can be developed by individual developers. They're still held to the master plan form that we've shown earlier. Current zoning, as Debbie was saying, the current zoning showing R3 as Hillside Park. What we'd like to do is to take the GMU designation that is already present to the site to the south and actually extend that up into our site, as it really does describe what this zone will be like. And it is really functioning as extending the core of downtown Milwaukee up to this important destination that will really feel much more a part of the downtown than it did before. We're also proposing to split the site, as you can see here, to the north and have the R1 zoning adjacent to the R7. And that supports our density in that zone. This is a quick map showing you a heat map, kind of where that density is located. That was something that was supported throughout our comments that we received throughout the open houses. And we got some stats there. So the blended density pretty much works out to 41 dwelling units an acre. This is a diagram of the open space on the site. The green areas are usable open space. This could be planters, this could be turf, places like that where you can actually walk around on some plant material or see it. The tan colored is also usable open space. It's more like a paving type of material. So you can see there's a high priority to open space on this project. It also supports some of the sustainability goals that the city has, such as including a 40% tree canopy over the entire citywide. And we took that mandate and applied it to our site. So some of this open space is there to support the amount of trees that we are going to include on the site to meet that goal. Along the same lines, this is our tree plan for the site. The light orange circles on this indicate existing trees that are deciduous, and the relative size is true to what the size of those trees are. The solid black lines are existing conifers that are on the site. The other trees are do 2 things. On the street trees, those have a species that is going to be consistent. You can see along 29th and Dwyer those trees highlight those uses in the buildings that are adjacent to them, and they give a character to the street that will be reflected with the street trees as they change as well. So you can see on our Hillside court, our main street down the middle, that picks up on a different tree species. Along 32nd and Meek, where those are higher capacity streets, we're also defining those streets with a different species of tree. In the parking fields, those are unique in that they are not limited to one species of tree. There'll be several different, so we encourage more diverse culture of trees there, and we don't have a singular bioculture there. So we're doing a lot to really promote a place that people are going to feel proud of, and these trees are going to be maintained by the city. So they will have to meet standards for the width and the size that they are intended to be. briefly, I wanted to just show you the stormwater plan. Basically, we are treating all the stormwater on site through the use of vegetated planters. Green streets is also what it's known as. So as the runoff flows down the streets, they will enter these planters, get treated over a period of time, and then that's how the stormwater is treated. There are alternate options for developers who say they can't meet the stormwater requirements. They have the option to submerge a detention system underneath the parking field behind their building. Really quick, this is the vehicular circulation and on-site parking diagram. This is showing you kind of the main idea of how traffic will work here. 32nd is our main collector road. All of our traffic is going to be coming off that onto two major intersections, Dwyer Street and Meek Street. We plan to then have parking fields that are located behind buildings, so they're screened. And we also have on-street parking as well through the use of parallel parking along 32nd and all of our streets. And while I'm here, I will clear up, we did make an error in the application that there is no intended bike lane on 32nd Street. We did, however, dedicate a large amount of property to the right of way to include parallel parking along 32nd Street. And we do have a wide planter there, and we do have an 8-foot sidewalk. So I just wanted to clear that up. One other great thing about this is just the amount of public improvements that are on this site. Basically, we're, as Steve talked about before, we're upgrading the 32nd and Meek intersection to include a left turn lane, which will reduce the northbound traffic's frustration on that street, which we've heard a lot about in comments. We also, like has been said before, these are all new roads, all new public roads, all new curbs, all new utilities. These are a tremendous benefit to the public in this situation. Also, the introduction of the grid back into the project is going to make those intersections safer as well. This is an illustration of the pedestrian access on the site. So in any urban area, it's important to have sidewalks everywhere so that connections in between buildings are maintained. You don't want to have people going around an entire block to get to where they need to go. And we know that a lot of people use public transportation on this site. So we have designed our public spaces to facilitate trips, by walking through the site to get to those bus stops. We also have distributed bike parking around the site. We know that some will be in buildings. We also know that some are needed outside buildings to be successful. So we are illustrating where we think we have located them, which is near primary building entrances or areas of activity on the site. We've also included some drop-off areas in the site as well for ride sharing services. Think Lyft or Uber. Even your friends can drop you off. So we've made specific turnouts for those places to happen. So they're never reserved. They're first come, first served, but they are dedicated for that purpose. And really briefly, just the way this master plan works, it allows us a lot of flexibility in the phasing. The first phase, we can do a couple of things. We can possibly sell Lot A for the capital improvements we need to make to the site. Lot B is the replacement housing for the residents in the park who are being displaced. And then we can make a clean break to the Hillside court up at the north part of this diagram to allow flexible, some flex in between phase 1 and when phase 2 or 3 starts, because we we do know there's some options available for which buildings happen in phase 2 and 3. This is a little aerial massing of what the site is intended to feel like in relation to the other buildings around the area. The Murphy site, that was the last plan that we had seen from them, so we briefly helped model that for them to show you the density that's going to be located to the south of us. Now I'll turn it over to Debbie, who's going to talk about some of our anticipated modifications that we'll be requesting.
Thanks, Ryan. And we'll go through this pretty quickly because I know you want to move on. But this is a conceptual approval. And so because of that, we want to use this opportunity to have the commission weigh in on a number of key aspects of the master plan to make sure that we're headed in the right direction. As Vera mentioned earlier, we are requesting several modifications to the development standards of the code to make the master plan happen. And we want to kind of zoom in on a couple of those and discuss them in detail so that the commission has a good understanding of what we're proposing. We're going to look at the minimum vehicle parking, the minimum bicycle parking, and the 29th Avenue connectivity. So next slide, Ryan. So on the vehicle parking modification, the goal of this modification is to provide adequate parking without overparking the site and taking away a lot of the open space that's a real amenity to the site. So we have looked at several different ways to reduce the parking below what's required by the code minimums. Some of those are reductions that are by right, which is that the Hillside Manor is vested with 59 existing parking spaces. And then also the entire site is located close to public transit. So that gives us an automatic 20% reduction across the site. But then the modification that we're requesting is to look at other mechanisms to reduce the number of required parking spaces, which includes compensating for the fact that it's affordable housing. And the ITE actually has, which is the transportation engineers go-to, has a 25% reduction for affordable housing. We're also looking at sharing the parking between the commercial uses and the residential uses because they have opposite peak hours of uses so that they make a nice complement for each other. And then there's also 137 on-street interior parking spaces within development that we would like to have counted towards our parking minimum. So that would include all of the parking spaces except on 32nd Avenue. And we've asked the city to consider having the spaces on 32nd Avenue signed for short period parking, like a 2-hour parking, so that those would be more focused towards the commercial use and less for overnight residential parking. And then we're also providing a robust transportation demand measurement program to try and help reduce the need for parking spaces. So overall, that gets us to a parking rate of 0.82 spaces per unit, or about 52 spaces above the minimum once all these various reductions are applied to what the minimum parking requirement would be. Next slide, please. Another modification we'd like you to consider or give us your feedback on is the reduction in minimum bicycle parking. So the code requirement is 1 space per residential units, and we're requesting to have 0.75 spaces per residential units. The goal with this modification is to strike a balance between providing enough bicycle parking to serve the diverse population without expending limited resources on unused bicycle racks. So some of the reasons for this modification is that we want to provide some areas set aside for bike share programs or e-scooter programs. And the bike share is a great option for affordable housing where there might be people that can't afford their own bike, but bike share doesn't count towards minimum bicycle parking. So we want to be able to have areas set aside for this and have it count towards the minimum. And then also a recognition that the bicycle network isn't connected at this time. HAC fully supports the work that's being done on the Central Milwaukie Bikeway Concepts Plan, but just recognizing that it's quite a long ways from actually being built out. And then finally, previous experience on other sites that bike parking tends to be underused in affordable housing communities. Next slide. And then the other thing that we would like input on is the 29th Avenue connectivity. So the goal with this modification is to propose a street connection that serves and is supported by both neighborhoods and the city. So Hillside isn't interested in seeing this street connect through, nor are the neighbors to the north. And everybody likes the idea of the bikeway or a pedestrian way, but we need input from the Planning Commission to know that we're headed in the right direction with this design, which would include a 24-foot radius turnaround on Hillside that would be striped with no parking, so that the turnaround would be functional. And then we have proposed bollards to close off the vehicle connection so that they would be removable for an emergency vehicle. I'm sure a gate would work as well, but we were proposing bollards. And, our justifications around this are, we looked at what the transportation system would look like with that street connecting through for vehicle traffic and found that it wouldn't neither improve nor degrade the surrounding transportation system. It's not a very viable cut through for traffic in either direction. The folks in the neighborhood to the north, it's a long drive around to get to 30 seconds, so they would be unlikely to cut through. And folks in Hillside, if they cut through to the neighborhood to the north, end up at an unsafe intersection at 32nd Avenue. So there's no great compelling reason to have this be a through street. And then finally, the majority of the lots to the north are already fully developed and don't need the street for their connectivity if they decide to add more units. Next slide, Ryan. Oh, I don't think that's the right slide. Well, anyway, I will just use this slide. So the last thing that we would like to just get clear input from the Planning Commission on is that we are headed in the right direction with the zoning and the comp plan designations and the density that we've proposed on the site. So I think if you remember what the zoning slide looks like, we're doing, there it is, GMU on the south half of the site and R1 on the north half of the site. And we feel like these zones are compatible with what's going on in the existing area. There isn't one single strong character of this neighborhood. You've got industrial to the east or to the west. You've got medical centers and commercial uses to the west. GMU zoning on an undeveloped site to the south, and then single family residential to the north. So it sort of is a site that pulls all these disparate uses together. And so we think that the zonings that we've picked are sort of take into account that there's a lot of different things going on in this neighborhood. It's also consistent with the Central Milwaukie Land Use and Transportation Plan that was recently approved. Our site was not included in that plan, but it did go include the Murphy site and added the GMU zoning to that site. So we think that having more dense units on the south part of our site will fold in nicely with that plan. And also the GMU allows limited commercial uses that would support the neighborhood. And we've limited what uses we're proposing. So a lot of the more use intensive GMU uses, we've specifically said we aren't interested in having on our site. And then it supports a mix of housing types with a step down density towards the R7. So that pretty much concludes what we were hoping to have your input on, and we're looking forward to hearing your discussion.
Are there any questions from the commissioners for the applicant's representatives? Commissioner Khosrowshahi.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and I appreciate your presentation. Very well done. And I like the design of this building you guys have here. A couple questions I had, and I know that, obviously this isn't in the plans right now, but just thinking, forward thinking here, the potential for solar on the buildings to make this building even more efficient and self-reliant, I guess, if that's something that's been tossed around at all or thought about for future plans. And then I had some questions on the spaces, the 375 spaces for the bikes. You mentioned there's still an ability to increase after that, right? Like that's not the cap. Is that correct?
I can answer that. It's the minimum. And so that's what we would like to start with. And if and when we see that there's a need for more bike parking spaces, once the bike network is built out, then certainly more spaces could be added onto the site. But we do want to leave room for a bike share program because we think it's really viable. And if we max out on the minimum, those bike share program wouldn't count towards the minimum. So that's sort of what we're going at with that. And then the solar on the building, as we mentioned earlier, a lot of affordable housing is required to meet the Earth Advantage standard or a LEED standard in order to qualify for the funding. And so solar is sometimes an option that you can use to meet the Earth Advantage or the LEED points. And this would be a great site for it because it's a lot of tall buildings with a lot of exposure. So I think that's something that would definitely be considered. I don't know if Devin has anything more to add to that. I did also, since I'm still on mute, I wanted to go back and answer. I realized I forgot to answer two questions that came up earlier in your discussion. One was the bus pullout on 32nd Avenue. And I think we did that because we felt like there was room available to pull a bus out at the Dwyer intersection, which is, we anticipate the busier bus intersection because it is a fully built intersection, whereas Meek is just a three-legged intersection. And it's also sort of a more central to the overall development site. But we can certainly remove that if it's not something that seems like it's going to be useful and is going to cause more problems than it will alleviate. And then the other question was about subsidized bus passes. And that is something that does happen in a lot of affordable housing developments, but it's really on a project by project basis. And so I think it's certainly not off the table, but we weren't at this place where we would be able to commit to that yet. And so we didn't want to put it into the narrative as a foregone conclusion because the Housing Authority of Clackamas County still needs to review what's possible, where that money's coming from, negotiate with TriMet. So there's a lot behind subsidized bus passes that would still need to go in to make that happen. And we didn't want to commit to that if that's not going to be actually possible.
Thank you for circling back on those. I appreciate that. Are there any other questions from the commissioners for the applicant's representatives? Commissioner Sherman.
Thanks, Vice Chair Edge. And thanks for the additional context on the transit passes. It's I think, exciting to hear about because I think in many ways, subsidized transit passes are probably much more viable than a scooter share or a bike share or some of those other options. I wanted to just kind of better understand what was talked about around kind of some of the alternative options around stormwater. So you had, there was a little bit of time that was spent talking about bioswales, and then there was kind of a brief comment talking about an alternative approach that, as I'm thinking through it, individual developers of the certain parcels could potentially opt into. So could you just help us better understand what you're talking about there?
Sure. Dave, are you on the call here, or would you like me to take this? Okay, I'll take it. Let's see, I'm trying to get to the right slide for you. Here we go. So this slide is showing, just so we see what we're seeing here, these little areas here are the green planter areas. They happen all along the street. There's a little diagram down here. I'll zoom in if I can do that.
Ryan, it looks like I have speaking privileges now.
Oh, great.
It's Christian. Hi, everyone. So we are currently showing 2 different options that could get imposed on any of the development phases. So currently we are showing stormwater planters, surface vegetated facilities, or underground detention. It just kind of depends on each site, how much site area is available and how we are going to meet the City of Milwaukie Stormwater Code at the moment. I don't know if City of Milwaukie has intentions to adopt the new 2020 City of Portland Stormwater Code or not, but at the time of this master plan, we were meeting the 2016 Stormwater Code from City of Portland, which has been adopted by City of Milwaukie. There is also an option to investigate the use of dry wells, which would probably be the most efficient use of space and our options, frankly, and would lessen the burden on the public facilities. So that would be another option that would get investigated at the time of each phase's development.
Great, thanks. So, and maybe just to put a point on it, I guess that my question is maybe we're talking at this point, we're talking, pretty high level concept, but as things were to move forward, we would essentially be green lighting an alternative, path A, alternative B, alternative C, and then whatever the developer is that comes in for parcel A, they're the one that gets to choose. Is it path A, B, or C that they move forward on? So while we might be talking about bioswales, we might end up in a different place. Is that understanding correct?
In a sense, yes. At the time of each development, they will have to meet the City of Milwaukee's development code. So they will have to go through the stormwater hierarchy, whatever that may be at the time of development.
If I might add a comment regarding the BES 2016 and 2020. We intend to stay with the 2016 for now. When we update our stormwater standards, my intention is to move the city to the Clackamas County West standard, because we are in Clackamas County and all the surrounding communities of us in Clackamas County are with the West standard. So ultimately, I think we'll move away from BES and adopt the new West standards.
Commissioner Edge, if I may, one additional follow-up. Thanks. With regards to the extending the GMU zone, I noted in kind of the applicant's proposal, there was kind of a table that kind of laid out kind of what's allowed in the GMU zone and then what is kind of Hillside saying they would or would not kind of allow on the site. And there's some discrepancies there. I believe it was kind of table 3.5 in the application. So is the thought being that like the parcels would be deeded with some level of restrictions to not allow some of those uses that you're currently saying wouldn't be allowed?
I think Vera could probably answer that question, but I can take my shot at it too. This is Debbie again. My understanding is that the zoning will have a PD overlay on it. So it'll be zoned GMU with PD in parentheses, meaning that it's a special version of the GMU zone, and you would have to refer back to the PD approval to know exactly what was approved on this site.
And if I could jump in on that, Debbie, I wanted to make sure that because your application is pretty specific about what uses of the GMU permitted uses were that you wanted to kind of have and be part of this proposal that also impacts the transportation impact study, because a lot of those uses there are a variety of traffic impacts from all of those different uses. So to kind of keep it focused, to be compliant with the transportation planning rule, there are a lot of reasons why a limited list of permitted uses as part of that GMU PD would be part of that the final approval. So it is intended to be a limited list of uses. Commissioner Sherman.
Commissioner Khosrowshahi, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you. I just had another question in regards to the transportation demand measures, the programs that you guys were talking about doing. Is that what's already being proposed, or is that what would be proposed in lieu of, if we were to reduce the requirement on parking? Like where the on-site bicycle repair station, the wayfinding station, the on-site TDM coordinator, is that stuff that's already being proposed, or is that what you want to do that's what you're committing to potentially with a reduced parking requirement?
Yeah, it's our justification for reducing the parking, because we think that the TDM measures will offset the need for vehicle parking. So, the site in and of itself will be extremely transit friendly, bike friendly. We've created really wide sidewalks protected from the vehicle lanes, some pretty fantastic bike or transit shelters, and a lot of the street network will help people get to using those facilities. So the TDM would be on top of all of the sort of built-in infrastructure to help encourage people further to use alternate means of transportation. So, I don't think they're necessarily something that we were planning to do, but we want to propose them to help offset the vehicle parking. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Commissioner Massey.
Thank you. Let me just thank the Housing Authority and their consultants and the staff on a very thorough proposal and analysis. A lot of good work that went into this. One of the Debbie asked the question that she wanted the commissioners' input on was the 29th Street link to the future, bikeway plan. And I just want to make sure that I have clarification here, and that I don't, see any need for this to be a vehicular connection between the northern part of the site and 29th and north. But I do see a bike portion through the bollards, or whatever you want to call it, to be important to the future of the bikeway plan. And I think there may be some parallel development that's going on here. But despite the fact that the whole bike plan may not be in place now, I certainly hope it doesn't wait for 7+ years to be in place. So just if you could clarify, Debbie, are you asking whether does the commission want there to be a bike connection from the northern part of the site into 29th above Hillside?
No, we are asking if there needs to be a vehicle connection there.
Okay, all right. I'm actually glad to hear that answer.
Yeah. At the pre-application conference, we were asking, does this need to be a street? And we were told that it was the Planning Commission's decision. So
okay,
we have designed it to only be a bicycle.
Okay.
And bicycle and pedestrian.
Okay.
And just want confirmation.
I just wanted confirmation that we were thinking the same thing. I think the bike connection is going to be important. I do have a second question, if that's okay, Commissioner Edge. Well, it's more of a comment. I want to tell you that I appreciated the discussion of the financing of the project, because as we go through this process and it starts to become more of a final proposal, there will be more interest by the community, and that will always be one of the questions I think that comes up. And I think that the financing of these projects is terribly complicated. And I would urge you to do the same thing in future forums, but you've got to simplify that explanation. It's terribly complicated. And I think that you will, I just want us to use the opportunity to explain to the citizens of Milwaukie how this thing gets paid for, and that kind of thing. So I know it's complicated, but I would just urge a simpler explanation, because it is difficult for most people to follow.
Noted. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Devlin.
Any other questions from the commissioners for the applicants? Okay, I have just a couple. And the first one was regarding the bus stop locations and design. Was that something that you consulted TriMet on and got their feedback about your proposed stop designs and placement?
Ryan, do you want to answer that one?
Yes, we did coordinate with, and I apologize, I cannot remember her name right now, but she was the person with TriMet that is in charge of determining service and the type of facilities that are at different stops. And we explained the project to her, let her know that there was going to be an increased number of units and activity on the site. And we coordinated with TriMet to make sure that these two bus stops on our side of 32nd are upgraded. So we've gotten an email from her describing what those stops would be.
Was there any discussion of consolidating the stops since they're really closely spaced?
We did not discuss that because I didn't think it was my place to tell TriMet where their stops would be, but I'm sure they'd be open to something, because an interesting stop could be right in the middle of the project where that large plaza is. But yeah, we did not approach that with TriMet.
Okay, yeah, that'd be one thing I think that would be really valuable, would be to consult with TriMet and ask for their guidance on stop placement, stop consolidation, whether or not a pullout is the right design, or if you're already creating a bulb out, a curb extension, why not just integrate the bus stop into the curb extension, which is more consistent with their guidance, especially for a frequent service bus route like we have on 32nd Avenue. So while we may not end up conditioning an approval on that, I think it would be a good idea to explore that possibility. And then the second thing I wanted to say is I really wanted to express my gratitude, because there's been a lot of there was a lot of feedback, a lot of public comment that I heard about the 29th Street extension and how that was going to be handled. And I really appreciate you listening to the community's wishes to not have that be a general purpose traffic through street with your proposal. So thank you for that. So last call for Commissioner Khosrowshahi, last call for questions of the applicant.
Good timing, I guess. This is my last question. This is something that just came to my mind as I was looking through some of the paperwork. I know there was a mention on emergency services with the increase of density. I'm just curious, has there been further detail on our emergency services being able to handle the increase in density?
We haven't consulted with any of the the fire, police services to assure that they're available to serve this site. I suppose that's something we can do. It wasn't part of our approval criteria or something that we typically do, but we could certainly make sure that we check in with both of those to assure that their service is available.
Okay, I was just curious. Thank you.
Vera?
Yeah, if I could just jump in, Clackamas Fire participated in the pre-application conference for this project. So the fire department, and they submitted notes and so on. And so their capacity was not something that came up as a red flag or anything for the department. So they're well aware of the project and did not indicate any concerns about capacity to be able to provide their services to the site.
And we've also brought, the police are well aware of this, right?
Correct.
Police, and also
Yes.
Providence Hospital is right across the street, so they've probably been made aware because they're within the 250-foot mailing. So
The 300-foot, correct. Yes. So they received notification as well. Yep. Mhm.
I believe they also have hosted some open houses in their facilities for this project. Commissioner Sturman, before we move on, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, thanks. I noticed, was there any direct outreach to North Clackamas school districts about the development?
I can jump in. I don't know if Debbie's team did, but the North Clackamas School District is on a direct referral for this application. So they received notification at the referral period for this project. So they were made aware at the time that all other departments and state agencies received notice of the project. We did not receive any comments from them.
Okay, well, thank you to the applicant team for their time. And at this point, we will listen to testimony in support of the application. Vera, are there any members of the public that wish to testify in support of this application?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I have Elvis Clark who has his hand raised. I'm going to.
And before we get started, the testimony is limited to 3 minutes per person. Commissioner Hemer, are you willing to keep time? Or should we ask staff to do that?
I can handle it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Elvis, I'm giving you permission to speak. All right, Elvis, I've brought you over, so you should be able to speak now. You're on mute right now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can, Elvis. Go ahead.
Okay. This is Elvis Clark. Neighbor connection on 29th into the north of the Hillside project, as that road, it's a narrow road, and it's well paved now that the city improved it or did a paving of it. And a lot of people walk it, and there's even kids playing on it just outside of the gate there, north of Hillside even now. So a lot of families walk their family members down that street, even during the day. And it's also bicycling and jogging path to Tri-Med Orange in
Did he submit in writing already?
So it's got a lot of positive attributes to it now. So we're hoping as a neighborhood association to keep it bikeway only and pedestrian. We recognize the need for the emergency. Oh, anyway.
Did we lose?
Oh, sorry, got disconnected. Sorry. Anyways, I'm supportive of keeping the 29th a bikeway only.
Well, thank you, Mr. Clark. Are there any questions for Mr. Clark from the commissioners? Okay, well, thanks for your time and testimony, Mr. Clark. Vera, do we have any other?
Okay.
Let's see. I'm looking at the attendees list. I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay.
Is there anyone else that wanted to speak? I don't see any other hands raised, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Vera. Are there any, does anyone, a member of the audience, wish to speak in opposition of the application?
Okay, I see, hold on. I do see a hand raised. I just need to find them in the list here. Kirsten Ackerman. I'm going to allow Kirsten to speak.
And please remember to state your name and address for the record, and testimony is limited to 3 minutes.
My name is Kirsten Ackerman. My address is 6615 Southeast 38th Avenue, Portland, Oregon, 97202. I don't know that my comment is necessarily in opposition, but I did have a question about handicapped parking or access by TriMet lift for the disabled individuals that currently live at the property and would have priority access to returning after the phases are completed. That's my question.
Vera, can we direct questions to you?
That's maybe, you certainly can. I think on this particular piece of looking for access to TriMet lift, I'm not familiar enough with the TriMet system to know about that or the accessible parking that might be proposed. And it sounds like Ms. Ackerman also has a question about the relocation and for folks that need more accessibility accommodations as residents of the project. So I think I might actually look to the project team to be able to respond to that question, if that's okay. Debbie or team?
Ryan, are you able to address that at all?
Sure.
Thanks.
Sorry, was that Ryan? I thought I heard someone else say yes.
Yeah, I thought I did too. Ryan,
Oh, okay.
I asked you if you were able to.
Yes. So, sorry, the second question regarding relocation, was that in reference to, I'm sorry, I need the questions restated again. I lost track.
No problem. I'm happy to do that. This is Kirsten Ackerman again. So my question is for handicapped residents that are currently living at the property. Would there be disabled parking for them upon their priority access return to the property? And the additional question is regarding TriMet lift. TriMet lift provides door-to-door access to individuals who require their services. So the TriMet lift comes onto the property to pick them up near their door. They access TriMet lift there, and then TriMet lift returns to the main streets. So I was inquiring as to whether there would be access for the TriMet lift to pick up individuals to work that door-to-door service. I can't tell from the site plan if there's turnaround access for a small bus to come in. The TriMet lift is a smaller unit than the TriMet bus, but I can't tell from your drawings.
Gotcha. Thanks for restating that for me. So in terms of the accessible parking that you're referencing, all projects are required to meet the building code requirements for the state of Oregon in terms of accessibility parking, which for an entire area like this would be about 2% of the parking spaces. We have indicated on this plan, and I apologize that you can't probably see it on the screen, but we know we have located and designated handicap parking spaces on the plan currently, and those are located behind the buildings and the parking fields. So in terms of that, yes, handicap parking will be provided. And in terms of the TriMet lift, nothing, so TriMet is its own entity and they provide service outside of anything that we would do on our site or not do. So there's nothing on our site that we're doing that would prevent TriMet lift from servicing here. Any of these parking fields can easily be navigated by a longer vehicle. And I'm sure it sounds like some of those shorter buses would fit the bill. And yeah, the street network here allows for circulating around the blocks too. So there's anywhere you need to be picked up, you can be picked up.
Great. That addresses my concern. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for your question.
Thank you, Ms. Ackerman. Are there any questions from the commissioners about? Okay, let's move on to the next testimony of those opposed.
Commissioner Irisa has raised her hand. I'm going to bring her over and allow her to speak.
Okay, I'm Irisa Hernandez at 103 Southeast of B Street in Milwaukie, 97222. I'm actually in Hillside Court, right on the corner. I'm in at the corner. This is on Meek and 32nd, just adjacent from the vacant lot. Looking at the plan, I'm not in opposition of the plan, but it's just, to me, living in this area as long as I have, this park, it's not as big as what is on the plan, and they have so many parking spots that I don't see how they can do that. The other thing about the TriMet lift is those lift buses, they are not allowed to back up on streets. Like they can't come all the way up the street and then back all the way out or go into a small parking lot and then back out. And if there are people that do have limitations in their mobility and are coming off and on, and you're in the middle of the rain or hail or whatever's going on, you're getting dropped off in the back of the building. Do they have to go all the way around? This is all pretty confusing. And whoever said that it would be helpful to simplify what they're doing. I've been to these meetings, not your meetings, but I've been.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't know if other folks are having trouble hearing you. Irisa, could you speak more closely into the microphone, please? It's just difficult to hear you. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you very much.
That's a Verizon commercial. Well,
I don't know. Irisa, are you there?
I'm right here. Can you not hear me?
Okay, we can right now. Yes, we can right now. Yes.
Okay, good. I'm not in opposition of what they're trying to do here, but the plan is, to me, it looks misleading because they drew these plethora amount of trees. We've got trees here and they're cutting a lot of them down to rebuild, but I suppose maybe they're just going to be short trees and bushes. They wouldn't be able to fit all those in here. And the other thing is, I don't know how they expect to put that many parking lots in. The many parking structures that they have shown on the diagram or on their plan sheet, that doesn't look realistic, living in this park area like that. The other woman who mentioned the TriMet lift bus for people with mobility limitations. Someone mentioned, yeah, they'll have plenty of room to go into the back of the apartments and pick them up and drop them off. If those parking areas are as crammed as they show them to be, I don't see how a TriMet lift bus would get in there and turn around. They're wide buses. They're not just short buses, but they're wide. And they're not allowed to just drive backwards out of a parking lot. They have to be able to turn all the way around. And I'm not sure how people with limitations are going to get dropped off in the back of an apartment building and then have to get their groceries all the way around to the front of the buildings to get into it's confusing, and to me it looks a little misleading, and I'm not understanding it. The meetings that I go to with the Housing Authority on these plans, the reconstruction plans, they're not going into much depth about this stuff. This is the first time I've ever gotten this much information on how and what they're going to be doing here. That's all I really have to say. It's misleading to me, and I live here, and I know how big this area is. I know how big the cars are here. I know how many people live in these houses. I don't know how they're possibly going to put that many parking structures in and also accommodate, buses for people that do have limitations. That's all I have to say.
Well, thank you for your comments. Are there any questions from the commissioners? Okay, Vera, do we have any other members of the public wishing to testify in opposition?
I don't see any other hands raised, no.
Okay, thank you. And then next up, we will ask if there's anybody that from the public that would wish to testify or that has neutral testimony.
Again, Mr. Chairman, I don't see any hands raised for the folks that are the attendees.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions from the planning commissioners regarding testimony at this point? Commissioner Hamer.
So Vera, it seems like decades ago that we worked on the GMU plan. So I need a little reminder of how this worked. From what could you refresh me, where are the store doors? Are they on 32nd or are they on the inward side?
They would be on 32nd Avenue. They'd be facing out.
But the window, right, there are wall-sized windows, I call them wall-sized, full windows on both sides, correct? Do I remember that correctly?
Storefront windows, you mean?
Yes.
Sort of how the entrances. So there are requirements for the design, both on the street facing, but then to the rear, if they're not street facing because they're facing parking lots. So corners, yes. The 32nd Ave, yes. But since the back of these buildings looks like they're actually going to be fronting on sidewalks and parking lots, not at the street, I don't believe, and I'd have to go back, I don't have my code book in front of me, but they would need to meet the design standards for the non-residential buildings, but I'd have to go back. I only have the one screen, so I can toggle back and forth and check the code while you're asking your next question. I can do that.
It's all right. So
yeah.
Then my next question is going to be kind of, could you explain the idea of the limiting of the list and the reduction amount of trips of those businesses in the GMU?
Generally, because the list of permitted uses within the GMU is fairly long. And there are multiple kinds of uses. And so I think there was a combination of, the kinds of businesses that I think the Housing Authority of Clackamas County, wants to have in there as part of, this overall development. But based on the the transportation impact statement study, as well as the compliance with the transportation planning rule. But because of these zoning changes and associated comprehensive plan land use designation changes, they have to be in compliance with the transportation planning rule. And that talks about the intensity of the use and how it's working in with the planned improvements within our transportation system and the TSP. And some of those uses, the idea being that the limitation on the list of the available uses within the development means that they are better able to comply with the transportation planning rule, because it isn't the full suite of these uses, some of which have higher trip generation aspects than others. And so by compressing the list or only having some of the uses be allowed in this GMU PD, they're able to kind of better design sort of what kinds of businesses will be in those buildings, but also better comply with the transportation planning rule for trip generation impacts for those uses. Does that help explain it?
Yeah, no. Okay. It gets there, I guess.
Okay.
And so the GMU, we allowed in some light manufacturing and some car repair and stuff like that, but we didn't allow that on the 32nd Avenue, right? We basically called it right, a walk-in store, or a selling of an item, not a repair or something like that.
That's right. Yep. And the only light manufacturing was actually as an overlay on the Murphy site. So there's the way it's written, there's sort of that overlay. That is also that manufacturing overlay, but that's on the Murphy site. It would not apply to this site.
And on 32nd Avenue with the GMU, did we allow live work units on that particular?
I believe live work is also permitted. If you can give me 2 seconds, I'm going to look it up and get to it right now. Hold on.
I'm sorry, Commissioner. We had a very long, lengthy year and a half of this GMU stuff, and I'm trying to remember what we.
Yep. No, you were right to ask. No, you're right to ask.
When you look at the table that they've, that I think it's table 3, table 3.3, live work is both permitted and on the list of the Hillside proposals.
Great. Thank you for that. Yes, live work units are permitted by right in the GMU. So they could do that.
And they're allowed on 32nd, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. All right, that's all. Sorry, I just wanted my memory to be clear. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks, Commissioner Hemer. Are there any other questions from the commissioners? And then I really just wanted to clarify in terms of the testimony that we received and the approval criteria. I wanted to clarify with staff and the city attorney whether about the relevance of the relocation assistance plan and whether or not that is part of the approval criteria that we will include in our deliberations.
I think if you're looking at the letter of the approval criteria with the compatibility, public benefits, all those sorts of things, I think the details of the relocation program are probably beyond the approval criteria as it's laid out for the plan development. It's a very specific issue, and I understand the concern around it, but I think it's outside sort of the umbrella of what we would consider or how we would interpret the approval criteria for the plan development approval. So yes, I don't think it is relevant in that specific case. No.
I would concur with Vera's explanation. I think that's more an internal process for the applicant to take care of and doesn't really have any implications in the land use context.
Okay, so I'd just like to advise, I'd like the other planning commissioners to please take that under advisement as we head into our deliberations. Is there any, does the applicant have any rebuttal or any additional comments in response to the testimony received so far?
I would just note that the relocation is a requirement of the HUD process. So it's definitely something that will occur. So just want to assure you all that we intend to follow through with that plan.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And with that, I will close the public testimony portion of this hearing. The public testimony portion of this hearing on file P-2020-002, the Hillside Preliminary Plan Development, is now closed. Do we want to take a 5-minute break since it's been about 2.5 hours? Or do we want to head into our deliberations?
Vice Chair, if I may, why don't we head into our deliberations and then maybe take the 5-minute break afterwards?
Okay. That works for me. Who would like to start?
Since I like going first, I will go first. This plan has been floating around for now 3 years. It's had a lot of community input. I do love the idea of the GMU being entered into this area. I think that is a great idea and allows these residents not to have to drive up to Safeway possibility, to have to purchase some necessary items. I think it is also, the GMU is also a huge benefit to the people that are at Providence, as well as they are visiting their friends and loved ones in the hospital. It gives them a commercial opportunity as well, and it enhances the other commercial districts that are there across the street on 32nd. I do have a little bit of concern about parking. And my only issue about parking is that the last thing that anybody ever gets rid of is their vehicle. And so I know that we call it a rapid bus transit. And I know that we're trying to encourage people to walk and bike. But once again, if you have an armful of groceries, you have a long way to go to be able to get those, and and it's all uphill to Safeway. So, and maybe we'll get another something in the Milwaukie center there, or the Milwaukie marketplace. But I like the connectivity. I like the idea about having the bikeway. I like the ballards versus the gate. I think the gate seems to close people off and maybe make them feel a little bit different than the other people on the other side of the gate. So I like the idea of the ballards instead of the gate. And I also like the fact of the connectivity so that people can go and enjoy Balfour Park, and that the public can come down and use the other grassy area that's there by the apartment complex. Compared to other PDs that we have gone through, this has huge amount of public access. It allows public to access it and enjoy the benefits of it. And it accomplishes at least 2 of the council goals that are currently, that we are currently talking about. So I am all for letting this go through, and then kind of weeding out a little bit more details as it goes through. But the GM and the R1, I'm all 100% behind.
Joseph, you're muted.
Thank you. I was just talking to myself there. Commissioner Massey, you're up next.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this. I mean, there's a lot of devil in the detail, but gosh, if we can increase the numbers of affordable housing at this scale, this is a exciting project. It's going to take a lot of time to work through all of the details, but I think it's going to be a positive development, and I can support it as well.
Thank you. Who's up next? Any other comments from Commissioner Sherman, Khosrawati, or Commissioner Commissioner Sherman, please take the floor.
Thank you. I think similarly, I'm really excited about this and would like to thank the project team for, the years of engagement that they've already been doing on this. I think with regards to the request to reduce the bike parking minimums, I think they've made a pretty compelling case. With regards to the requested reductions on parking minimums, I really would like to think more about subsidized transit passes or kind of transit TDM focus as opposed to some other options that might not be as viable. I'm really excited about the connections on 29th and the bollards. I really hope that those bollards can actually set a broader vision for the 29th Avenue Greenway, and maybe we can think about additional traffic calming on the Greenway as we move north and off of this parcel, but into other places within the Greenway. And also am really excited about kind of the wider sidewalks and planting strip. I think that'll really enhance the pedestrian kind of element. I think you've all heard me kind of say walking down 32nd with my 4 and 6 year olds feels like a pretty dangerous activity. And I know that in this portion, it won't because of these improvements. So I'm really excited about that. So I'm also supportive of this, and I think just for us to remind ourselves, one of the comments that the project team made when they said they opened up the list for new affordable housing and they had 13,000 inquiries for 1,000 spots. So this project is going to help meet some really important needs in our community.
Thank you for that. Would either of the other commissioners like to offer any comments? Commissioner Ert, please take the floor.
I just want to echo some of the comments that already have been made. It's pretty clear that there was a lot of thought and effort put forth through this whole project. So I appreciate the proposal. I appreciate the much needed housing that we need in our community. So overall, I think that the benefits of everything that's been laid out, I support. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Commissioner Khosrowshahi, would you like to add anything?
Not at this time. Just thank you to the applicants for putting so much time and effort into this. And, we're headed in the right direction with affordable housing, so I appreciate it. And I'm excited about the TDM stuff that they discussed. So some of those measures sound like they're going to be pretty good, as well as the commercial uses. That's going to be some needed things right there, and that's been part of the issue. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, well, thanks everyone for your comments. I too am in favor of this particular proposal. The one thing that I, really had concerns about is, it really seems nitpicky at this point, but it is, as we, consider the recently adopted comp plan and, how it's, really trying to advocate for, more transit, more pedestrian connectivity, more prioritizing of, pedestrians. I refer back to the policy, comp plan policy 8.2.4 B, which is to design streets for the equitable allocation of space for different modes. And it feels like on the site plan that we're actually taking some of the sidewalk away and using that to be a bus platform in the area where we introduce a curb cut for the bus pullout. Whereas just the next stop to the south, which also is on this property or adjacent to this property, that is not, the same treatment is not, proposed there. So, really with these frequent service bus routes and the guidance that's offered from the transit districts, as well as, other national associations, of transportation officials, this is a deviation from what's proposed is a deviation from what the recommended guidance is for a route with this kind of traffic and, with this kind of frequency and ridership. And so, I would ask the commission if they would be interested in supporting a condition for the applicant to revisit their their bus stop location and design with TriMet, and to perhaps implement the guidance that TriMet recommends, rather than us setting an edict that they must do X. Perhaps the condition would be that they consult with TriMet and implement TriMet's guidance for bus stop placement and design on this type of thoroughfare adjacent to this type of a site with these types of uses.
Yeah, I would be willing to support something a little bit more generic, just like that they go back and consult with TriMet and either consolidate a stop or use the particular standards that they have. I don't want to set anything in stone on them, but yeah, just ask them to have a further conversation when they come back. We'll have that answer.
Thank you for that.
I'll accept
any other comments on that suggestion from the commissioners?
Yeah, I could support that condition as well.
I could support that as well, and feel like in some of the testimony that Vera forwarded, there might have even been an email exchange with somebody at TriMet who was talking about station consolidation. So I think it makes a lot of sense, Vice Chair Edge, to include a condition like that.
And for those of you who don't know, TriMet is a unique beast and goes through a huge process every time that they have to move a bus stop or move something off of the street, move it onto something on the street. And so the applicant did say, well, we didn't think it was our place, and it might be making a mountain out of a molehill. But at least they could ask and see, maybe that could be something that could be easily within TriMet systems, easily taken care of. So,
yeah, you're right. They do have a public process when they choose to close down any stops. So that would be part of this as well, I imagine. Commissioner Erd or Commissioner Khosrowshahi, would either of you like to opine on the possible condition or on the proposed condition?
I would support it. I support it. I think it's it'd be good to go through TriMet and see what they say and get their quote unquote expertise on that.
Thank you. Commissioner Erd?
Sure, I'm in support.
Okay, great. Vera, do you have enough detail on that?
Sorry, I was muted. It sounds like what we're asking is for the applicant to consult with TriMet and implement their guidance on location and design of proposed bus stops for the project. Does that sound about right? Okay.
That's perfect.
I would like to make it even more general. I don't know about implement their designs, but consult with TriMet for the best practices for this situation. That way you could get into the bus stop issue, you can get into the bulb out, you can get into the curb cut, but yeah, give it a more of a broader general, and even they could maybe even talk about the small little TriMet buses that we heard testimony about that there are concerns about. But I think all of that conversation could kind of happen maybe.
Does that work, Vera? So we just add specifically for best practices. Okay, perfect. Okay, are any other deliberation or discussion? Okay, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve in principle with the conditioned kind of approval that we move forward with, what is this? PD 2020-002.
I would second that motion.
Second by Commissioner Massey. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. All those opposed? Passes unanimously. Thanks, everybody. So with that, are we interested in taking a 5-minute recess? Yeah, okay, I see some thumbs up there. All right. Vera, can we take a recess, please?
Okay, yep, I will let Josh know. So 5-minute recess. So that puts us back here at 9:15.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
So Joseph, I hope that stuff that we sent worked out for your group, and that you had it's a lot of stuff. So I hope that all kind of worked
interesting.
out.
Yeah, it was fun to look over.
I can't believe how big our file was on it. I mean, that was
ridiculous. That was awesome. Well, that was really cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Commissioner Edge, we are on air.
Excellent. And so just for posterity's sake, I had one little bit of business to conduct with respect to the hearing. The decision per MMC 19.311.6 is a conditional approval of a preliminary plan development. It is not an appealable decision. The applicant must, within 18 months, file a final development plan and program, which will be reviewed as a Type 4 land use application by both the Planning Commission and the City Council as the final local decision-making authority. So with that resolved, we will move on to work session items. And I see that Brett's been hanging out waiting for us. So take it away.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Vice Chair Edge and Commissioners. I'm Brett Kelver, Associate Planner with the City of Milwaukee, and I'm here tonight with Derek Abe from our consultant team with Alta Planning and Design to give you an update on the Central Milwaukee Bikeway Connection Project. And if I may, I will share my screen and start a short PowerPoint presentation that we have. So this is we're coming back to you after our last update in early December of 2020. We gave you an update of this project and we're here again. And this actually ties in really nicely with the item that you were just discussing about the Hillside Manor redevelopment. The area that we're focusing on here with the Central Milwaukee project, just to highlight these areas, it includes the Hillside site, which you were just looking at. The main streets are 32nd Avenue and Harrison Street. We have the railroad tracks and Highway 224. There are several other important redevelopment sites. The Murphy site that was mentioned during your Hillside briefing. Also, Providence Hospital has a site at the corner of 34th and Llewellyn that they're looking at redeveloping. And then just in recent times, you did approve a multifamily development here at the southern edge of the Central Milwaukee area, the Monroe Apartments. So this project, if you'll recall, is coming out of that Central Milwaukee Land Use and Transportation Plan that identified the need to figure out how to safely get cyclists through this area to make that connection. The idea is to provide some kind of a low stress bikeway route. And we want to clarify, I guess, that there are obviously a lot of bicycle needs in the city. And one of the things we were reminded of with some of the outreach responses that we got, where a lot of people had comments about getting safely to downtown, particularly on Harrison Street. And that is the focus of another project. But just to be clear, our goal with this project is to figure out how to safely get from 29th Avenue, the southern end of the current street, to the Monroe Street Greenway at the southern edge of the Central Milwaukee area. So that's what we were looking at. There were three routes that we've been looking at throughout this project. The one that we're describing as the base case is the one kind of in purple, this option here kind of on the farthest west edge of the area. That was a route that was identified more or less in our transportation system plan and also in concept in that Central Milwaukee Land Use Framework Plan. And then we also identified two other routes that we want to look at. One was kind of focused on 32nd Avenue, and the other was a detour through Llewellyn Street and 34th Avenue. And you may recall from your review of earlier materials that, initially the materials we put out labeled these as options 1, 2, and 3. And we decided to change the labeling and hopefully avoiding some confusion, because we thought it was important to clarify that the base case route, the one that was in our earlier concept plans, the reason for this project was because we recognized at some point that it was not going to be as easy as we originally thought to make that route a reality. And so we decided that it was fair to indicate that that was kind of our starting point, the base case, and then to identify these two alternative options. So just to set us up for a little more discussion that Derek can lead us through, you'll recall we talked with you and the City Council in December of 2020, and then we jumped into a couple of engagement opportunities with the larger public using our online resource, the Engage Milwaukie page. After we had a lot of conversations with the folks we've identified as key stakeholders, that is the property owners of the different key redevelopment properties and businesses in the area. So the Murphy site, folks from Providence Hospital, the Hillside, and the County Housing Authority, the Harrison Plaza. We fired up the Engage Milwaukie page and presented a survey where we wanted to present these different options and ask people some questions about that. And some of those results are summarized in the staff report as one of the attachments there. And then we also, of course, we're tracking feedback from the key stakeholders. We presented a revised version, kind of a refined draft of that conceptual design report just last month in February, and provided an opportunity for some online engagement. And at that stage, what we were doing was we were showing the community kind of the recommended route, which we'll talk a little bit more about this evening, and kind of soliciting some more comments on that. If you'll recall from your own discussions and what we heard from the City Council as well as a lot of the public who responded, especially the initial online survey, there was a lot of interest and support for that base case option. And to be sure, it on paper does present the most direct route. It was the concept from the beginning, and we can talk a little bit more about when we did more of the analysis. Just identifying some of the pros as well as the significant cons with that route. To clarify what we heard from the key stakeholders, so the folks who, were representing those different redevelopment parcels in Central Milwaukee, they all seem to agree that option 2, the route using 34th and Llewellyn, was the one that seemed to them to be the most reasonable and appealing. So we can talk more about those results if you have questions. I think right now I'll let Derek lead in a little bit to some of the analysis that he and the rest of the project team conducted to come to the conclusion of the recommendation that we made. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Derek.
All right, thanks, Brett. Just doing a sound check that you can hear me okay. Great. Good evening, commissioners. Thanks for having me. Derek Abe with Alta Planning and Design. I am going to talk through some of the technical analysis and the evaluation criteria that we use to determine the recommended route option, which we'll go into detail here in a bit. What you see on your screen here is an excerpt from our conceptual design report. It's the route options matrix that shows you the scoring and the outcomes of that scoring for the 3 options that Brett just talked about. And so I know you want to look at that last column on the right-hand side of the screen, but before we get to that, I just wanted to take a minute to explain, what all went into this and make it very clear that, this is an evaluation that was both qualitative and quantitative in nature, right? So these scores that you see are, they're assigned to the criterion, and they are really intended as sort of ranked measures of each route option relative to the other route options, right? So they're not necessarily indicative of the actual magnitude of each of these criteria. Hopefully that makes sense. And I think most of the criteria that you see here are pretty self-explanatory. We have the safety and comfort of each of these routes, the directness of each of these routes, to what degree they provide access to destinations in the project area, right? And then alignment of the development with plans of some of the key properties. As Brett mentioned, there's a lot of development happening on the horizon here, and we wanted to take that into account. And then feasibility of implementation. So that relates to project readiness and potential phasing, right-of-way acquisition, those types of considerations. And then lastly, of course, cost. And the assumptions that we made about each of these options in this table are really a reflection of what we assumed would be the highest and best types of bike facility types that would provide the most ideal levels of safety and comfort for folks that we would hope would use them. So with that, you can see that option 2 emerged as the highest scoring option by a pretty significant margin, right? Base case option and option 1 turned out to be pretty close overall. But what you'll notice about the base case, I think that sets it apart from the other 2 options is that it had some really, really good scores, and then it had some really, really poor scores. And so it, it averaged itself out that way. Option 2, on the other hand, which was the winner here, at least in terms of the technical analysis, had across the board some above average scores. So that is at a glance why we are recommending option number 2. So with that, Brett, if you could go to the next slide. So this is the route alignment, the concept for that option 2, which we are recommending. And as you can tell from the top left corner of the blue line that you see there, we are sort of imagining what that realigned street grid would look like when the Hillside Manor development, when that property redevelops. And so I was able to catch the tail end of the last presentation and was happy to see that this isn't too far of a deviation from what is currently proposed. But in any case, the route does connect the 29th Avenue Greenway to the north through the Hillside site, and then makes if we're heading from north to south, makes a left onto Meek Street there, where it follows Meek Street out to 32nd Avenue. And then I'm just giving you a high-level overview. We can talk a little bit about the design details in a minute here. But from 32nd Avenue, it jogs over a block over to Llewellyn Street, where it then turns down 34th Avenue and makes its way across Harrison and over to Oak Street. Now, this potential option has some pretty important design considerations, and the chief of which I would say is what we do at the potential crossings of 32nd Avenue, right? This is a stretch, although it's only a block, it's a stretch that we know presents some significant, issues around safety and comfort for folks that may not be as experienced on their bikes, may not know the area well, maybe new to the area, maybe just moved there. And we want to ensure that that is going to be the most intuitive route. We're going to make sure that it is safe, that it is comfortable, folks know where they're going. What is shown here are 2 potential options. You see a route that's sort of dashed on the left side, and then a route that's dashed on the right side. And what we're showing are 2 potential options where it's what we're envisioning is a shared use path situation. And we're saying that it's an either or here, because what we're essentially trying to do is minimize the number of formalized crossings of 32nd. So we want to choose one of them, and the one that we choose has some implications for the type of facility that we design and where it goes. If we decided we wanted to place it on the west side, that would essentially mean that the crossing would happen at Llewellyn Street. If we place the shared use path on the east side, that would mean that the crossing would be at the north, at Meek Street there. And ultimately, what we decided with this recommendation was that it made a lot more sense to push for the path being developed on the east side there. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One of which is the location of the current TriMet bus stop, and the adjacent marked crosswalk to the north there, where there's a median island connecting the Hillside Manor property with Providence Hospital property. And we figured that would provide a much more intuitive connection, a much more convenient connection for folks that were going in and around the area, and in particular between these two properties. I will mention also that, because it came up in the last conversation, that what we would propose here as well is a slight relocation of the TriMet bus stop to better align with the new proposed crossing location. So the crossing itself would be a marked crossing. We would suggest that it have some enhanced crossing features, such as the median island, which we would need to relocate. We would also recommend including rectangular rapid flashing beacons at this location. So those are those bright flashing beacons that are user activated. And that is yet another reason why we want to limit the crossing to just one location. When you have too many of those in close proximity, their effectiveness tends to be a little reduced, washed out. And so we would recommend putting that beacon on the northern crossing at Main Street. So that is one of the I would say one of the biggest things we need to figure out with this design if it moves forward. When they cross over and they transition over to the Welland Street, we are aware of the development application that went in for Providence's new facilities there along the north side of New Welland. We would need to think through what the appropriate facility type would need to be for bikes if traffic patterns on the Welland were to change. We anticipate that there will be more vehicles on both the Welland and Meek Streets as a result of all of the development, but would want to better understand the need for physical separation, for instance, a protected bike lane versus a shared street with marked sharrows type of environment on the Welland. From the Welland Street, it turns down 34th Avenue, and then we reach the crossing of Harrison Street, where we would again recommend some enhanced crossings, marked crosswalks, potentially a median island or some curb extensions there. And again, the rectangular rapid flashing beacons that would be user activated and assist folks who are crossing the street at that location. The traffic calming there is particularly important because of the grade of Harrison, right? So that's at the bottom of the hill there. And we've heard from numerous accounts that, that is a place where we often see vehicles speeding, drivers speeding. And so traffic calming there would help to slow traffic, make it a much more comfortable environment for people that are stepping out into the street there. Again, the location of the current bus stop would necessitate some conversation with TriMet about relocating, and we would propose that relocate to the far side of the intersection, or that northwest corner there, to minimize the likelihood of site impacts, visibility when a bus is boarding and alighting with passengers. We would want to reduce any likelihood that vehicles would be, encouraged or tempted to speed around them, and we call that the multiple threat. We'd want to eliminate that. So moving that bus stop to the far side would go a long ways toward that goal. So once folks on bikes had crossed Harrison, they'd continue down 34th Avenue there until they got to the end where it's currently a dead end or a cul-de-sac. And that also happens to be the city's water treatment facility site. And we've had some preliminary looks at what it would take to provide access across that site. And from what we can tell at this point, it looks like there is the space there to create a pathway that would connect folks from the end of 34th Street all the way to Oak. And that brings us to the southern terminus of this route alignment. So with that, I think we'll entertain any questions about the particular route. after the next slide here, if we could go there. And so we also wanted to acknowledge here that there was a lot of interest, particularly in the public involvement, open houses that we did and the discussion board, a lot of interest in the base case scenario. And that was, of course, of no surprise. It is the most direct route on paper. And we did want to acknowledge that, you know, the advancing option number 2 as the recommended route doesn't necessarily preclude the development of this potential route or facility in the future, right? In fact, we would strongly encourage the city to continue to push this as the plans for the Murphy development site continue to progress, right? We just don't have the certainty around what that will look like, what the potential route alignments could be across that site at this moment. So as things develop, we would encourage, you know, the city to continue to look at that. And likewise, as Harrison Street itself develops and a route connection that takes folks along Harrison directly into downtown is considered, that may provide other opportunities to re-examine what the appropriate facility type would look like in that immediate area, crossing the railroad and crossing 224. With that, I think I'll turn it back to Brett to talk a little bit about what comes next once we've given the recommendation.
Yeah, thanks, Derek. I think, the final slide we were going to show is just kind of reminding you of where we are in the timeline of the overall project. It just kind of harkens back and checks off some of the things that we've done, you know, from late last year to January and February. Where we are right now is, you know, we're giving you this update tonight. In 2 weeks, we'll be talking to the city council and kind of giving them a similar update. So, you know, it's kind of a final chance to collect some more feedback and thoughts and suggestions from both entities before we look to go back to the city council in early May to adopt this concept plan. So we'll have some direction moving forward. So with that, I guess I'll back up a little bit, a couple slides, and I'd like to see what questions or thoughts any of you have about what you read in this refined draft of the conceptual design report and the conclusions that it came to or is coming to. Let's see.
Commissioner Hema?
Hands up. Yeah, you're going to get that. Thanks, Joseph.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that if we're doing the 34th and we're putting in bulbs out, we're moving the bus station, that Clackamas Fire District and the police department are asked, because you may not be able to put a bulb out there because of the way that those emergency vehicles come out, especially the big ladders, the fire trucks. And that might be a nonstop from the beginning. So I think that before you make a recommendation to City Council, that you certainly have that conversation with them first before that. I'm disappointed that I am surprised that I understand that the base route, right, is complicated more because of the train, right, the tracks that are there and traffic blocking those tracks. But I still have the same concern with 34th as well. You know, if you have somebody walking across there on a frequent basis, how much traffic is going to back up, certainly during peak hours, to the railroad tracks when they have a green light and they think that they can go. And if you have another stopping point. So I don't know if that's something that you need to talk to the railroad or ODOT about on timing of that. That's why I prefer 32nd, even though that it's a scarier path. At least it's all built in to each other instead of adding an extra complication into a system there that could cause real harm to a lot of people if, if there's issues about traffic backup. So I just wanted to put that in, and yes, please talk to the fire department and the police department before you guys take your recommendation to city council, because they may say, hey, we need this amount of turn radius. And if the bus is sitting there, we can't have the bus sitting there, and so on and so forth. So I guess that's my comment.
Right. Thank you. That's good reminders. That I think what you're talking about, Greg, is primarily the design of any kind of protected crosswalk that might happen here at Meek and 32nd. I think we understand there's going to be required a new special left turn pocket for northbound traffic on 32nd to turn in, and so whatever crossing enhancement.
I'm talking about the intersection of 34th and Harrison.
Okay, right. Derek, I guess let me ask. You mentioned concern about bulb outs, Greg. Derek, were we talking about bulb outs, or what? Can you remind us?
If you guys put in a concrete median in the middle, right? And the ladder truck needs a certain turn radius to be able to turn up Harrison. And if that's in the way, right, because it has to be a certain amount of length. So I'm worried about the fire department access and their needs to get out of their driveway, and how much of a radius they need to be able to turn, and their concerns about people crossing the street there, a designated crossing the street, with them trying to access that as an emergency. I think that should be a priority that you discuss with them before you even make a recommendation to city council, because it may not be viable towards their emergency needs.
Okay, understood. Yeah.
Brett, if I could just jump in there real quick. So we aren't necessarily making the recommendation for a curb extension or a bulb out per se at this location. We're simply saying those are the types of design improvements that we would consider as a part of this. And certainly before we advance this project development, we would consult with fire and EMS as well. What we did include, as you know, for the purpose of the planning level cost estimates that we developed for each of these options, was in this particular option, I believe, a median refuge at this location. And so it's a little bit different in terms of, you know, the space requirements and turn requirements, the radii, when we have a median versus curb extensions. But yeah, absolutely. These are conversations that we would have as we advance this into design.
Right. And I guess, yeah, like Derek's saying, we'll double check that with the fire department. I don't think that, since we're not talking about bulb outs at 34th, we're talking about a median refuge, so some concrete in the middle of the street between the two lanes. You know, there's still going to be adequate lane path. I mean, whatever kind of vehicle is still going to be able to get through. If your concern is about being able to get a fire truck out and around in front of it, we can double check the distances. I'm pretty sure that it's far enough away from there that it's not going to be an issue, but that is duly noted. In terms of any potential backup problems to, you know, between a crosswalk here and parts west, I mean, obviously, I think the traffic light is going to prevent there from being any kind of blocking of the railroad. So I guess, you know, we can double check in our understanding of, you know, what kind of queuing might end up backing up to the signal. But the signal itself also ends up providing a little bit of its own natural clearance mechanism, I think. But those are things that, obviously, not wanting to impact this intersection would be part of the consideration here.
And so my worry is that the signal, right?
Hey, Greg, sorry to interrupt for a second. I don't know if you have some control over your microphone. You're coming in for me a little warbly.
Oh, that's me too. I thought that was just me. So okay. Yeah, your audio's a little low, Greg.
How's this a little bit better?
It's not any better. You were better when you first made the comments. Now you're warbly. I'm not sure what it is.
Oh. Well, probably because my wife is using too much internet. So I'll go a little slower here. My concern is that you have an unpredictable signal and a predictable space of signaling to protect everything. And so That is where I'm concerned that a surprise backup may happen. So all works out. I trust engineers. I also trust common sense. So.
All right.
Brett?
Commissioner Massey?
Yeah, my question is about the driveway through the water treatment facility. That is currently closed, and is that going to be opened to bicyclists only?
Yeah, I think the idea there is that's simply a bicycle and pedestrian connection. It would be bollarded, I think, in a similar fashion to what you guys were talking about at the southern end of 29th, between the end of 29th and Hillside. It's not being open to vehicle access. It's just for bicycles, and obviously pedestrians could use it as well.
Okay, so then when we get to that intersection, I think that intersection is confusing already. And now we've added a bicycle only lane into the intersection. Thoughts on changing the traffic control, or does it remain as it is? Because right now Oak Street has the right of way.
Yeah, I think that there's still a little bit that hasn't been 100% worked out in terms of the redesign of that intersection. And maybe Steve can speak to this a little bit, but what's going to, I think things will probably happen at that intersection as a result of the Monroe Apartments redeveloping. So there may be some new traffic control happening at that intersection as well. But you're right. Once again, like whatever is happening at that intersection, the terminus of this bike connection needs to fit in there.
Okay, so I understand that. So there's other complications. Let's just say we waved a magic wand and this happened tomorrow. Would the bicycles on that extension, that driveway, would they have right of way over the folks on Railroad and Monroe?
My guess would be no. Derek, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with that, Brett. It would be a standard crossing.
So it's like a pedestrian crossing?
Yeah, it'd be a marked crosswalk, basically, to get folks across. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brett?
Yeah.
Is that Justin? Go ahead.
Or is that Steve?
That's Steve.
Oh, is that? Go ahead.
I can add some to a couple of the comments here. With the crossing on 34th and the concern of backups going back to 32nd and the railroad, I know in talking to Clackamas County, their traffic maintenance division, they have concerns if some kind of a flashing beacon or electronically enhanced PED bike crossing is within 300 feet of a signalized intersection. Then they have concerns about potential conflicts of someone wanting to cross the street at the same time there's a green light on. These intersections are some 500 feet apart. So I know Clackamas County Traffic Engineering would not be concerned with an RFB 500 feet away from a signal. It should not have impacts. I can clarify with them again. This was the last time I talked to them was about a year and a half ago on this. I could clarify that with them. As far as the intersection of Railroad, Monroe, and Oak, that will be studied with the Monroe Street Greenway project. It's been identified as needing an upgrade with that project, and we'll look at it further then. It will not be upgraded for the Monroe Apartments. It was not part of that traffic requirement, that improvement requirement for anything the Monroe Apartments is doing.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. So just really quick, I saw that Justin had his hand up.
I think Justin.
Oh, I did. I accidentally hit that. That was a miss hand up, but since you called on me, Commissioner Edge, I'd like to remind you, if we're not going to finish up in the next 10 minutes, we need to move to extend the meeting.
Yeah, and that was my next point of business, is that we need to, it would be nice to get a motion to extend to 10:15 just so we have a little breathing room.
Make a motion to extend to 10:15.
Second.
Commissioner Reamer. Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, we'll extend to 10:15. Thanks, everyone. Now, Commissioner Sherman, you're up next.
Thanks, Vice Chair Edge. Maybe just a few comments. I think one, as I was thinking through this and reading some of the remarks around some of the stakeholder engagement, I wish we all had maybe done some more intentional engagement of some of the residences along 34th. I feel like in reflecting on this, we might have done a lot of really good and deep engagement with some of the major property owners, but maybe didn't focus on some of the residences that would also be impacted. So that's just kind of a comment there. I think also kind of continuing the comments, I think I'm excited about the idea of the rapid flashing beacons and the potentially a protected bike lane on Llewellyn, the median island refuge. I think all of those things are great. And at the same time, as I'm thinking about that, I'm seeing dollar signs and I'm wondering where those dollars are coming from, especially in comparison to kind of the base case. Because in the base case, I feel like you're getting a developer to develop a significant portion of this bikeway as part of that development. And so I think that's just kind of one of the things that I'm thinking about here as well, is I feel like we're making some fairly major concessions that help further enable the development of the Murphy site. And that we should just keep that in our mind if we are moving forward with Route 2, when and if Murphy comes up for redevelopment, they're asking for things from us as the Planning Commission. We're already making some, potentially significant changes here that, as we see through some of the stakeholder engagement we have done, are not necessarily the preferred option from the public, but that are going to better enable development on the site. So those are some of my thoughts. I want to also just thank the team for the work on this. This is like, as I think many folks know, this is a pretty sticky wicket. There's so many constraints and challenges, and we keep talking about all of them. If only we could kind of wave a magic wand and figure out what to do. But want to just thank everybody for their work on this.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. If I may just speak to a couple of those points. I think the assessment of the cost and some of the trade-offs of cost between the different options, and Derek, you can correct me if I go astray here. I think that while there are certainly some costs involved with Route 2, I think one way to think about it is they're not on the scale of something like the base case, and some of them are improvements that we and maybe Steve can correct me, that some portions of them, not all of them, but some portions of them may be facilitated by some of the other development that happens in the area. And some are things that we probably need to do anyway. For example, even if we weren't trying to route bikes across 32nd at Meek, there are 2 TriMet stops here, and pedestrians are going to try to get across there anyway. So the difference in cost between a crossing that is sufficient for pedestrians and one that is sufficient for bicycle traffic as well, I'm not sure is that much of a different universe for something that is an improvement that will benefit what's happening in the area anyway. And similarly, the scale of cost with the crossing improvement at 34th and Harrison, I think, is just, it does cost money, but not nearly the scale of some of what we're looking at for an overcrossing or undercrossing of Harrison closer to the railroad. And to clarify too, I think in terms of timing, one way we thought about these options is that, with obviously the development that you guys were talking about earlier tonight, just the Hillside site and what we know is coming with the Providence Hospital site, and at some point Murphy's coming in, those things will be happening kind of more in the sooner aspect. And so one question is, what can be implemented in that near term affordably? Because we are going to start to see, as soon as one of these developments happens, there are going to be people who are trying to get around in here. And to flash over to the base case, we got a pretty clear indication from ODOT that an at-grade crossing at Harrison is not going to work. So unless we come up with the scale of money that will be required to get over or under Harrison, this isn't going to happen anytime soon. And even with redevelopment of the Murphy site, again, I can be corrected, but I don't think that it's going to be proportional to have the Murphy site pay for an over or under crossing. I think what we could hope to do, and what I think we want the report to encourage, is to not lose the opportunity with the Murphy site, depending on how they plan it. If they are planning some kind of a street that comes through the middle, we should try to take advantage of that in terms of, making sure that's going to be accessible for bikes if we can at some point get a safe crossing. Or if they're trying to develop the whole thing, in the middle, and we could push maybe to get some kind of an easement for a future connection here and keep looking for the bigger dollars that it will take us to get over or under Harrison. I think that's one thing we wanted to emphasize is, there is a lot of support for the base case. It's not bad to have redundancy in our system. The magnitude of cost difference is significant enough, and the time probably that will be involved to get this to happen is one that we don't want to lose this, certainly when the Murphy site comes in. But in terms of what we'll probably need to do to make some immediate improvements for the people who will be coming in the nearer term, it does appear that option 2 is important to look at there. So fair enough, your observations.
No, thanks, Brett. That's also extremely useful. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'd like to add also an additional comment on the west route of the base case along the railroad tracks. I have very painful memories of the Monroe apartment complex in 2019 when we had proposed the Monroe Greenway to go from Oak to 37th along the railroad alignment. And about 90% of the community opposed that idea because the pathway was located behind proposed garages. It was not along a street. There were some visibility issues. And it was overwhelmingly rejected by our community. And we don't know how Murphy site's going to develop, but if they choose to put a row of buildings along the west side of their lot to kind of buffer the site and sounds of the railroad traffic, I think we're going to face the same community push back that it's not a safe route for a multi-use path. So I experienced that my first 6 months here. I sense the community is not going to change their opinion on a route that goes between buildings and a railroad track. And then, as Brett mentioned, the crossing of Harrison at 31st, ODOT Rail has specific distances you must keep a crossing away from it. There's only 300 feet between 32nd and the rail. So Clackamas County, I know from their previous, as I mentioned, for some kind of enhanced pedestrian crossing there, it's too close to the signal, and that would definitely impact the ability of the signal to work and of the railroad crossing to work if we put some kind of a crossing light in there. And then, as Brett mentioned, an overcrossing, I'm pretty sure it'd be an overcrossing, because undercrossing, there's too many pipes in the way. But an overcrossing there would be probably more cost than the entire path to be installed. So yeah, some problems with that route.
Commissioner Khosrowbadi, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you. I have a question, and I know that we're on, this is option 2, but I kind of want to go back to option 1. What was it specifically about option 1 that the public didn't really see? Yeah, if you can go back to the scorecard, I guess, what I'd like to see.
Well, some issues with option 1, and I know Commissioner Hemer alluded to this a little bit, that there are some things about the route in concept that are very direct, and it's true that it could take advantage in concept of an existing signal there. I think part of the problem is there's not a lot of space at that intersection. If you remember, what we're trying to do is create a bikeway that feels low stress and open to riders of all abilities. Right now, I'm someone who would ride my bike on the street on 32nd right through that intersection, but I would not feel as safe as if I was in at least a bike lane, which there's currently not room for, or especially if I was with a family, on a separate path. And so I think part of the problem with that option one really comes at both the intersection with 32nd and Harrison and how limited space is, but also especially on the southern side of the intersection. I mean, you're looking at the need to probably acquire some property or portion of property there so that you can expand the facility and have a separated facility to have cyclists be able to safely get through there. So those are some of the constraints with 32nd. Derek, do you want to say more about the assessment?
Yeah, no, I think that captures it really well. In addition to the likelihood of having to acquire some right of way on the south side of the intersection, I mean, we're likely going to have to do that to the north as well. Obviously we've got there the city has an agreement in place with the Murphy developers to provide an easement for something like a pathway along their frontage of 32nd, but that does not extend all the way to the intersection. Kimmy's Market there on the corner still provides, or it is challenging in a lot of ways. The right of way, curb to curb, is very narrow, and in order to provide the level of comfort or separation that we would want at that intersection, it would require having to expand that and widen it out. And currently what we've heard, what we all know about this intersection is it's really busy. It's really congested. There's a lot of vehicles moving through it. But it's also very complex. There's a lot of driveways, a lot of turning movements, sometimes unpredictable turning movements that are happening in and around this location. And so there's a lot of work that would need to be done to improve the intersection itself, and then thinking through what the appropriate bike facilities would be north of that point and then south of that point.
Yeah, one just specific example of a liability with 32nd is, a very common movement on 32nd is southbound traffic turning right to get on Harrison and go this way. And so there you've got this classic right hook problem where I'm a cyclist waiting to go across. I've got someone who's making a right turn on red, or they're ready to go. They've been waiting, and we have an immediate conflict. So it's not something that's unresolvable, but it's already from the start not a great setup because of a very common movement that wants to happen at this intersection.
And if I'm not mistaken, that's also one of the reasons why there isn't currently a pedestrian crossing at
right. The crosswalk is closed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. The only reason I ask is because of how much development's already going in there. And it looks like, just talking about Hillside, what they're doing there, you got another development going literally across the street from that. It just seems like if there's ever a more monetary conscious time to do this, it would probably be in cohesion with the developments that are happening if we did want to look into widening it or putting in a bike lane. Because it looks like you're eventually going to have to do something, whether it's there or it's at 34th. It just seems like 34th, it's about 500 feet from the light on 32nd to 34th where it would be there. So you're still going to have that same amount of traffic on Harrison, because there's a lot of traffic that goes on Harrison. So you're going to, coming across, I'm just trying to think of what's going to be more efficient, and what's, if there's money that's going to be spent on this, what's the best way to spend it? If the best way is to make 32nd safer, since, you're going to have people on there anyways with those commercial sites that are going in on Hillside and whatever is going on the Murphy side. There's going to be foot traffic. Somebody's going to have to give on that street anyways, eventually, because it's going to be increased. We're already increasing the density there. So there's going to be more foot traffic, more bikers, more. So, what's to say that people aren't going to skip Llewellyn and just say, I'll just go down 32nd and take my chances. Now, granted, obviously, I'm sure people with families and stuff probably will take the safer route. But I'm just saying, are we setting this up to where people are just going to cut through 32nd anyways?
Well, I think of course, the push for this project is to identify a route that then we would focus, signage and education and whatnot on. This is where you should be going. There's always going to be, more confident cyclists who are familiar with the area. Some may always just go through that route, but the point is we're trying to establish a low stress, safe, family friendly route. Steve, I don't mean to put you on the spot. I wonder if you could say any more just about what, to get at Adam's question about, aren't we going to have some things happen at this intersection at some point anyway? I don't know if you can speak at all about the scale of improvement that would be needed at this intersection to create enough space and the kind of facility that would be safe feeling for cyclists and pedestrians to cross through there.
Well, a couple of thoughts. As Brett mentioned, the west leg is already closed for a crosswalk, and that's because of the high amount of movement from 32nd going westbound on Harrison. And so the only practical leg on that to cross is the east side. So to get to the east side, the most common crossing would be at Llewellyn, and then you have tremendous impacts to the businesses there. It's like a sidewalk, some landscaping and parking. So we have to figure out how to fit that in on the east side of the street to carry the traffic down to that east leg. The other concern I have is that if we make the official path going across Llewellyn and 34th, then that's what we're recommending people to do. And if a bold cyclist decides to go down 32nd and run across the intersection, they can do that. But if we make that our preferred route and someone gets injured, then we put ourselves in liability of an insurance, because we've now created what could be, and I'm not sure how safe we can make this route, and I don't know which route is safer, over crossing 34th, crossing 32nd. I have heard some early reports from people that 34th is bad because it's the bottom of the steep hill and cars tend to pick up in speed there. I suggested the island in the middle as a ped refuge island. I've used that previously as a safe place to be if traffic gets too heavy for a few, 30 seconds or a minute or so, give some place to stay. But 32nd and Harrison's a really, really busy intersection. And to make it bigger, to expand it, I will take a rough guess at $1 million plus, because again, just the traffic signal poles to relocate them is probably $400,000 to $500,000, and then any other hard work you have to do with it. So it would be a tough go on that one, in my opinion.
Yeah. So just really quick, I want to time check us. It's 10:08. We're only approved through 10:15. So are there any other comments right now from any of the commissioners? Okay, I'll just jump in with a couple comments of my own. It'd be really nice, to have the political will and the financing available to, put the primary bike route that feels safe for a 60-year-old or an 86-year-old to ride it, that is destination oriented, that actually takes you to the places you will want to go in the neighborhood, rather than winding you around back and, making it, you still have to figure out how you get from the Bikeway over to 32nd to go to Kimmy's Market if that's where you're going, and so, if that's your destination, then we want a bike lane that's protected and safe that goes to that destination. So it'd be really nice if we had the political will to be able to pull that off at some point, although this might not be it. I certainly don't support an overpass. An underpass might be impractical, but we do kind of need both kinds of facilities, where you have a facility that is kind of a bike highway, a throughway that allows this through traffic to get from the future North Clackamas Greenway along the Railroad Avenue up to the Springwater Trail. There's going to be commuters that are going to want that, and they might want an underpass and, to bypass all the traffic, on Harrison and, go through the back way. And, they're not going to these shops. They don't care. But people in the neighborhood need to be able to access destinations. And so if we're asking them to use their bike instead of their car, then they need to be able to use their bike to get to that destination. And so we have to stop with this practice of winding everyone around the destinations that we know they want to go to. With that said, option 2 is probably the most practical for now. And so what I would say is, let's really look at, that treatment at 34th and Oak and, make that a gateway to the Ardenwald neighborhood, and make it feel inviting and, bikes go here and it's not an afterthought. We're not winding you down some dark alley, in between, buildings and a railroad track, but we're inviting you into, this bike corridor that's safe, and has the traffic calming treatments on Harrison at 34th and maybe even diverters that prevent, turning movements onto 34th by motor vehicles. And so, you can feel safe on 34th Avenue and you can feel safe with your 6-year-old or your 86-year-old grandmother, and that's, these are important considerations. And so, I wrestle with this and I'm really, I'm on both sides of this coin, with no easy answers, but, that's kind of my thought is, it's, let's do a good job of it and make it work well for everybody. But really we need to keep in mind, how are we going to get people to the destinations in their neighborhoods? So again, we got 4 minutes left. Are there any other comments from the commission? Okay, Brett, did you have anything else to add?
No, just thank you for sharing all your comments and questions. And if you, like I said, we're going to the city council on April 6th. If you happen to think of anything else, or if something else comes to you after tonight and before then, feel free to send me an email and we can pass that along. So
awesome. Thanks a lot, Brett. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And thank you, Derek. So that concludes our work session items. Are there any other business or updates from commissioners or staff?
Yes.
Laura.
Hello. I would just like to say that we kind of suspected tonight might go long. So we took Vera's staff report and just put it in your packet regarding the comprehensive plan implementation. So it gives you an update of what's going on with the CPIC and where we are right now. And also to encourage you, you should have all yesterday received an email about having the survey, the open house up online on Engage Milwaukie. So we encourage you to take that survey. We encourage you to send it to your friends and neighbors to take it. We learned from our last time around that 75% of the people responded based on an ask from someone that they knew. So if you know people, and then Amy, I know that you've got that great site. So if you can post it up on Facebook, that would be awesome. We'd really appreciate it. And if you have any questions before the next update, always reach out to me or Vera.
I just want to let you guys know, because I'm a nerd, I attended 2 NDAs and I got to hear the speech twice on CPIC. Thank you for reaching out to the NDAs. I got to hear Mary and Laura, and they were both excellent. And it is 50-50 on the parking situation, just to let everybody kind of know. And a lot of questions on how do we get the affordable housing built that we want, and so and you've already heard my speech about it. I said that you get more with honey than you do with vinegar. So incentivize, incentivize, incentivize. I'm done.
Thank you for that. We'll continue to work through those issues as we work through all the things that are on the table right now. So thank you. And then I don't know if any. Sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Edge.
I was going to ask if there was anything else before we move on. Okay, and then the next item was, do any commissioners have any other items for discussion? And we're down to our last minute. All right, thanks everyone. And then forecast for future meetings.
Oh yeah, so real quick, April 13th, you'll see there's the Milwaukie High School sign variance that's coming up. We're not doing Hillside. We took care of that tonight, so that was a tentative on there. But one thing that isn't on here is the Providence housing conditional use for the parking lot. That will be on April 13th. And then for the 27th, we're not going to be ready for Coho. That's not quite ready yet. So that'll probably be in on May 11th. And that's all I've got.
Awesome. Thank you. Was there anything else that you wanted to add, Laura, before I interrupted you?
No. It's all good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. All right. Good night, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Good night. Thank you. Bye.